Now on Book TV, we're live with author and political commentator Nick Adams on In Depth. Mr. Adams is the author of several books, including The American Boomerang, Retaking America, and his most recent Green Card Warrior. Born and raised in Australia, he's the founder of the Foundation for Liberty and American Greatness, an organization dedicated to promoting American exceptionalism. Nick Adams, live on In Depth with your calls, tweets, and Facebook comments.
Nick Adams, in your most recent book, Green Card Warrior, you write, by the time I was 25, I realized I was an American trapped in an Australian's body, and I was desperate to get out.
That's exactly right, Peter. I really was, and I am just thrilled to be here in the United States of America. I've been living here now as a permanent resident for the last 7 months. In about 4.5 years' time, I'm going to become a citizen of the United States of America, and a journey that really began such a long, long time ago is really about to come full circle. And I'm thrilled every day I wake up and I thank God that I'm here in the greatest country in the history of the world. This is a place where you can do anything, where you're free to be yourself, where personality hasn't been downsized, and where I feel most comfortable when I get on the big 16, 18 lane freeways in Texas, which is where I've chosen to live, and I happen to think the best state in the Union. I'm just traveling down, and sometimes I look around and it's the plethora of options that you have, whether it's eating or drinking or shopping. There is really no place like it. You can, the freedom is palpable. It is very much discernible. And perhaps that's something that someone who spent the first 32 years of their life living somewhere else probably has more of a perspective on than, say, a native-born American that really hasn't experienced life anywhere else. They may have been other places, but never for such an extended period of time living in those places. And I can tell you, as someone that has had the chance to live in Australia and spend extended periods of time in Germany and Greece, there is no place like this. There's no culture like America. There's no feeling like being an American. The patriotism, the excitement, the energy, the optimism, all of those things are just remarkable. They're incredible. And it's why America has been the #1 destination for immigrants, remains that way, and always will be that way, because it's just a place unlike anywhere else.
How is it different than Australia?
Well, it's different to Australia. Australia is a great country, but Australia is not a kind of place where you can blaze a trail or leave a legacy or colour outside of the lines or be bold or take a risk or do something different. What happens in Australia is, if you differentiate yourself, whether it's through ambition, whether it's through success, even whether it's just through perceived success, you are resented. The media, the public, the culture kind of gangs up on you, because there is this idea that we all need to be the same. There is this idea that it's not right to not conform, that we've got to colour inside of the lines. There is something called the tall poppy syndrome, which many of the viewers today may be familiar with. And essentially, we all know what a poppy is. A poppy is a flower, and poppies grow, much like humans, to all different kinds of sizes and shapes. And ranchers like to come along and cut poppies to size to make them all the same, because it looks prettier. And that's basically the analogy that exists. The moment that someone gets a little bit bigger than the pack, all of a sudden they're lopped. All of a sudden they have their wings clipped. All of a sudden their confidence is taken away. They become a target. It's the reason, Peter, why almost every single famous Australian that Americans would be familiar with don't live in Australia. They live here in the United States of America, because this is the place where you want to be successful. This is the place where people look up to people that have done well. When I go into a Barnes & Noble, when I go into bookstores, I love reading. I'm always I'm still to this day taken aback by the size of the self-help, the personal development section. It is a uniquely American trait to want to learn from people that have made it, to not believe that they just got lucky, to not believe that, you know, they're not better than I am, they've just had a different life. There is a real thirst for success. There's a real aspirational trait that exists deep in the American psyche, and it's one that I love and that I've always identified with my entire life, and that's what led me to write what I wrote, being an Australian, you know, trapped, or an American trapped in an Australian body, because I had that desire to self-improve. I had that desire to be the best I could possibly be. I have always been someone that has strived to be great, not mediocre. And while it may seem a little bit harsh, I think it's fair that Australia and Australian culture and Australians tend to aspire to mediocrity rather than greatness.
What were your first impressions as a child of America?
Well, my journey
exposures?
with America really began at a very young age. I was diagnosed at the age of 16 months with stage 4 neuroblastoma, a very rare form of childhood cancer, and one that's notoriously difficult to diagnose. And when it is diagnosed, the tumour has almost always already metastasised. And in my case, it was no different. My tumour was in my abdomen, and it had metastasised all throughout my body. And for a long time, for many, many months, my parents had brought me to doctor after doctor, to paediatricians, to anybody and everybody that could possibly help them. And no one could identify, no one could diagnose what was wrong with me. And you've got to really think that this was December of, well, when I was diagnosed it was December, but this was mid-1985, late 1985, Australia, a population of just 12 million people, 13 million people. And no one could tell them what was wrong with me. And then one night they did what I think they'd done on 1 or 2 prior occasions when they felt they had no choice because I was so unsettled. They took me to the emergency ward of the local children's hospital. And that night there was one overnight doctor there, and he was a young man, he had a smiling face, but he had an accent. And as he looked me over, his smile disappeared pretty quickly, and he said, "Look, I'm not sure, and there's not much I can do for you right now, but I think I might have seen this before, and I think that this is what your child has, and you need to make sure you get him in for tests first thing tomorrow morning because this thing looks pretty advanced." And sure enough, the next morning my parents would go in to the hospital, and these tests were conducted that this doctor had specifically ordered, and it turned out that his hunch was right, and that doctor was an American doctor. So I'm fond of saying that I haven't only studied American exceptionalism, I've lived it. In fact, I'm alive because of it. And then, of course, there was the myriad of Hollywood movies and shows that I was exposed to. Of course, most Americans don't realise that 90% of the Australian media market has been and remains American. So all of the same shows that people watch here are the shows and the movies that we watch in Australia. And I had the great chance to watch many of my favourite movies. So the Rocky series were my favourite movies, and to this day, every time when I travel between Washington DC and New York for Fox News or something else, I always have to resist the urge to get out on the Amtrak at Philadelphia and go to the art museum and run up the steps, because I'm a bit of a Rocky junkie. I know every single line of every single movie back to front. And to me, that really exemplified the American idea and the American story of the underdog up against all opposition imaginable, getting a chance, getting an opportunity, and being able to make the most of it. So those kind of movies, and then I grew up watching Full House and Who's the Boss and Alf and all the other good stuff that many 80s children will remember. And all of that felt so wholesome, felt so family-oriented, felt so patriotic, felt so nice. And I always wanted to be a part. I mean, I remember being 8 years old and telling my parents and telling my teachers at school that I wanted to come to America. And they all thought that I was insane. I mean, you know, he was this child born in Australia whose paternal family hailed from Greece, whose maternal family hailed from Germany, talking about going to America. And even my mum and dad, who were extraordinarily well-travelled people, the one country, the one place they'd never been to was America. And so no one in the family had been to America, and yet here was this 8-year-old kid who was fascinated, enamored with the place, and saying, I want to go there and I want to speak to people. And nobody could understand it. And it wasn't until I got a bit older, Peter, and I was reading biographies by people like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I got to know the stories of people like Stuart Varney and people like Elon Musk, that I realised that it's not just me. There are a lot of people that from an extremely young age have this inexplicable magnetism for America. It's been well documented, and most of those people who come here end up doing phenomenal things because they're so grateful and appreciative of the country and the idea and the culture and the atmosphere that's fostered here, and that's certainly what I want to be a part of.
Nick Adams, what's the process of becoming a permanent resident like?
Well, it's difficult, Peter. It's really difficult. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do. In my case, it took me 4 years. It cost me close to $50,000. It was torture. It was something I will never, ever forget. I guess like all adversity, it made me stronger, and it's made me stronger, and it's made me more grateful for what I have. But I've got to tell you, I was put through the ringer. So I applied to be an extraordinary ability permanent resident. So that basically the 4 ways that you can come to the United States of America as a permanent resident is either by coming to work here and then going through labour certification and becoming a permanent resident, marrying an American, winning the green card lottery. Every single year there are a certain amount of green cards that are given out, and it's meant to work like an automated lottery by the United States government. And the 4th way is the Extraordinary Ability Green Card. Now, the Extraordinary Ability Green Card is not really open to that many people because it's a very elite, very exclusive green card. You have to essentially prove that you have risen to the top 5% of your chosen field through extensive documentation about your life and from people within the field that you're claiming the exceptionalism in. And the process of putting that application together itself took me 1 year, and I managed to go and get some of the biggest names in America to support my application, and it was submitted, and then it took another year or more to get the approval for that by the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service. And then the very last step, Peter, in all of this, so the way it works is, in order to collect your green card, you have to physically enter the United States. So the green card is not mailed out to you. You have to actually physically enter the US to collect it. And in order to be able to do that, the State Department needs to issue the immigrant visa. So the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service, which falls under the Department of Homeland Security, they make the determination on whether or not you are eligible for the green card that you have sought and applied for. But the State Department has to grant you the immigrant visa that will permit you to actually collect your green card. So in my case, I had an approval by the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service for my Extraordinary Ability green card, and that means that the heavy lifting is done. The decision has been made, and all that really remains is some paperwork and then what is meant to be a very routine, very procedural, rubber stamp kind of interview at the US consulate, or embassy, whatever's closest to you. In my case, it was the US consulate in Sydney. And you go in there with your passport, your police check, your medical check, the original of your birth certificate. It's kind of like, if I could use an analogy, you know, you've got a ticket to fly somewhere and you check in, and then you go through security, through the TSA, and then you get to the gate, and at the gate you've still got to show your boarding pass. So it's kind of like being at the gate and having to show your boarding pass. Everything has been done, and it's really just to make sure that you're the person that your application said that you were. It's really not meant to be an opportunity to relitigate the decision of the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service. In my case, though, that's exactly what happened. And I got an individual at the US consulate that proceeded to turn my life completely upside down, not only my life, but my parents as well. And that application, after this individual held onto my passport for 7 weeks without any explanation, leaving me stranded in Australia, my passport was returned to me with a 1-page letter, of which 3 paragraphs were printed. And all it said was, "Dear Mr. Adams, after reviewing your application and the interview that we had, we've decided to return your approved application back to the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service with a recommendation that the approval be revoked." No reasons, nothing. Meanwhile, my attorneys in Manhattan, that cost a lot of money, were saying to me, "Nick, we've been practicing immigration law for 4 decades. We've never seen this. This doesn't happen. This is not meant to happen. There's something going on here and we're never going to know. But this has really not gone down the way it's meant to go down, and the only solution you have is a political solution." And I said, "All right, well, tell me what to do." And they said, "Well, you need to go and summon your political contacts, and they need to make representations on your behalf to the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service, because otherwise it appears that someone's got it out for you, and we don't even know what the next steps are because we've never seen this. We don't even know what happens." And I said, "Okay." And they said, "But there's a further problem." I said, "All right, well, what's the further problem?" And they said, "Well, there's this long-standing legal principle called immigrant intent. And immigrant intent stipulates that if you have ever demonstrated a formal desire to be a permanent resident of the United States, which obviously I had by virtue of my application, you are never ever again, and you've been rejected or declined, you are never ever again allowed to re-enter the United States in your lifetime, even as a tourist." It's a legal principle that nobody in America, practically nobody, knows about. But it's the case. If you try legally to immigrate to the US and the US knocks you back, you can't ever come here again. There's a cloud about your entry to the United States. And anyway, I took a risk. I sat down with my mum and dad around the kitchen table, and I said, "Mum and Dad, I don't know what to do." And they said, "Nick, you haven't done anything wrong." They said, "You've got a book tour coming out." So my book, Retaking America, was due to come out in February of 2016. This is now December 2015. And they said, "Nick, go. Have a copy of your return flight itinerary with you so that you can clearly show that you plan on returning," they said, "and tell them that like you always do." And to this point, Peter, I'd been to America 17 times. And you'd think that if I planned to stay, I would have already stayed. And anyway, I came for the book tour and had a very successful trip, and I took the opportunity to muscle up as much political support as I could. And I was very grateful for more than half a dozen United States senators and 15 or 16 congressmen who intervened and made representations on my behalf, and thankfully justice prevailed. It would later emerge, and these are only suspicions, but that this particular individual that was at the source of all of this was somebody who had the opposite politics to me, and they decided they didn't like my politics, and this was returned to the US Immigration Service in the hope that I'd never be able to return here again. And in fact, for a period of time, I was essentially on a no-fly list. So I actually couldn't come to America. I went to the airport in Sydney to travel to the US in June before I got my green card, and we were turned away at the airport. Again, something I'll never, ever forget. So it was tough. It was difficult. If I had to do it all again to be an American, I'd do it.
Well, your newest book, Green Card Warrior, is written almost like a diary of your experience trying to get to this point. And you say at one point that you researched the person who interviewed you at the consulate, and you found out that he was a gay liberal, and that's what prevented you from coming into the country.
Well, yes. I mean, that's exactly what I found. That's what we found. So essentially, I mean, when all of this was going on, Peter, everyone was saying to me, Nick, we don't know what's going on. And you can imagine when you have something so close to you. I mean, I had my flights booked to immigrate to the US on the 8th of October 2015. And my interview at the US consulate was on the 22nd of September 2015. And the legal advice that I'd received, again, was that this was just going to be routine, that I had been thoroughly vetted, that the decision had been made, that this was very simple, that it wasn't a big deal, and that it generally took about 5 business days for the green card, or what they do for the immigrant visa, to be put into my passport, and then I'd be able to travel on the 8th of October. And not only was I not able to travel on the 8th of October, I had to forfeit that travel, I had to lose those tickets, and in those following 2 or 3 months, it was torture. I mean, we couldn't work out what was going on, we weren't given any explanation, and so my instinct has always been, Peter, to go out and try and find out things on my own. And I managed to track down this individual, and I did discover that he was a homosexual activist. I did discover that his politics were of the Democrat nature, and having been all of my adult life up against the ogre of the left, having experienced that persecution and that ostracisation and that blacklisting, both in employment in Australia as a high school teacher and trying to get a media internship at university, and really throughout my time, I instinctively really knew what happened without even knowing, because I know that this is the way that many on the left play the game. They are merciless, they are ruthless, and they are determined to... I think that's the major difference between conservatives and liberals. When conservatives don't like something, we look away, we wrinkle our nose, we say, we might comment to each other, geez, that's awful, that's terrible. But a liberal doesn't do that. If a liberal sees something they don't like, they go out of their way to make sure that they don't let it exist.
It is often said, you write in Green Card Warrior, that the immigration system is broken, but that doesn't even begin to describe it. It's more than broken, it's an unmitigated disaster.
It is. It is. When good people have such a hard time coming to the United States, and bad people have such an easy time coming to the United States, Peter, you know that something is very, very, very wrong. I came to America to make, not take. I came to give, not receive. I came to join the place, not to change it. I came because there are opportunities and there are possibilities that don't exist anywhere else on this earth. I came to be an American. I came to subscribe to American values. I came to make sure that America doesn't end up being Australia, the place that I felt that I had to leave. And so I would think that I would be the model person that America would want coming in as an immigrant. And yet for me, it cost so much, and not just for me, anybody that tries to come to America legally, and I know that there are going to be many, many viewers right now that are listening and watching this that can relate. Anybody that tries to come to America legally is up for tens of thousands of dollars. They're up for a lot of heartache. They're up for a very onerous, burdensome, bureaucratic system. It's incredible. We're now in 2017, and I can tell you that still to this day, not one piece of the application that you do to become a permanent resident here in the United States, nothing is electronic. Everything is paper. So just think about that for a second. And when we're talking about Australia or different countries, what happens is that it goes from, so I was processed at the Texas processing centre. They then send it to the major visa processing centre, which is somewhere here in the northeast. And then they send it down to Australia. And this is all by snail mail. So this is where the years come. So just getting it from one place to another is 2 months. Getting it from there to Australia is another 3 or 4 months. Then they have to schedule you for an interview. Then if something doesn't go right, they send it all back, and then it goes back again. So it's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. And it's unfortunate because I know so many people that want to come here, that are exactly like me, that want to give and not receive, that want to make and not take, that want to join the place and not change it, and yet they can't. The cost is too much. The years are, they're looking at it and they're saying, well, I just don't have 4 or 5 years of my life. I saw what you went through, Nick, and I don't want to go through that. And that's really America's loss. So I think that it's a very, very big problem, and I'm determined in the platform that I have to make people aware of it.
So what's your take on the immigration executive order that President Trump is going through right now?
I'm very much in favour of it, Peter. I think that when it comes to the security and the safety of Americans, we can't take any chances. I think when there are so many bad apples, you've got to look at the orchard being these 7 countries that have been compromised by terrorism. I think that we live in a very dangerous world. I think it's very clear that we are at war with a religion that has elements of a religion that have failed to modernise, failed to reform, and are hell-bent on our destruction, that really want to die more than we want to live. And we need to take every measure we possibly can to protect ourselves. We need to take every measure possible to protect Western civilization, to protect Christianity. I think that that's really, really important. And I'm thrilled that we have a leader now of the free world that really cares about promoting and protecting and perpetuating the free world.
From your book, Boomerang, you write, America must continue to be a refuge for the talented young of the outsider nations.
Yeah, so Peter, I see all around the world many really talented people that are simply not embraced by their own country. They're not embraced because the culture doesn't really exist there to nurture their abilities. And they are instead resented, they're looked down upon, they're not supported. So one of the things that I find incredible here about the United States is the mentoring that happens. So here in America, it's a very American thing, and it's probably a result of the patriotism that exists here. It's considered patriotic, it's considered the right thing to do to help young people, to lift them up, to share the experience and the wisdom that you might have if you're an older person, and impart that on the younger generation, because there's this idea that they are going to be the ones that are going to be bequeathed the most incredible responsibility, and that's keeping the American idea alive and passing on those American values. That doesn't happen anywhere else. I find that Australia and Europe, and there's really no point, I guess, comparing America to any other country. I'm going for the countries and the cultures most similar to the United States. It's much more of a me society. It's much more of a selfish society, a more self-interested society. It doesn't matter how old you are, you want to milk everything for as much as you can. There's no idea about passing on the baton. There's no idea about making sure that the future is intact. It's all about the now. The thing I've always found fascinating about the United States is its far-sightedness, is its future. You see that in policy, you see that in the infrastructure. Living in Texas, and I know that Texas is growing, but it's incredible. I mean, there are just roads and highways being constantly built, and they're being built with a look to the future. In Australia, in Sydney, the major highway that connects Sydney to Canberra, which is our Washington DC, our capital, is 2 lanes. 2 lanes. And you go back to the Harbour Bridge that was finished in 1932, that's got 8 lanes. And then the Gladesville Bridge, which has got 6 lanes. And somehow we've gone back in time. And so now most of the major highways that are being built have got only 2 lanes on each side. And for me, it's incredible because there's no foresight. There's no look at how things are going to grow. There's no look at how things are going to expand. And yet in America, the psychology is constantly about the future. And it's one of the reasons why I am so hopeful about America's continued prosperity and so confident about this being an American century.
In your writing and in your language, you use the word patriot or patriotic quite a bit.
Look, I think patriotism is the most underrated virtue of our time. I think it's the most attacked virtue. It's been attacked ever since the Second World War, where I guess the idea was that patriotism was the fault of the war happening and nations doing awful and terrible things. I happen to think it was evil that did that, not patriotism. I think the idea of loving your own country should be inherent. I think it's natural. I think it's logical. I think it's beautiful. I love the outwardly expression of patriotism here in America that manifests itself when you drive through neighborhoods and almost every single house has got an American flag flying. When you go to a sporting event and the national anthem is sung or God Bless America is sung. I love all of that stuff. Tonight we're going to be watching the Super Bowl, and that's going to be a patriotic extravaganza. I mean, I've been to college football games where fighter jets fly over and the military do marches, and I've been to military appreciation events at baseball games at Petco Park in San Diego on September 11. And these are just things and events and feelings that you don't get anywhere that really make you feel American. I think it's one of the reasons why America's been able to integrate or assimilate and subscribe to e pluribus unum so successfully, and certainly in stark distinction to other countries like Australia and England and Germany. People that come to America generally tend to be American, and it's because there is this robust patriotic identity, this tradition that is intrinsic to America that people find contagious, that they find intoxicating. And I love patriots. I love patriotism. I think patriotism really tells you a lot about the person. And this is the most patriotic country in the world, hands down. Americans don't realise that, but it is. If you go and fly an Australian flag outside your house or on your car, you're considered a redneck. You're considered backward. You're considered to be some slack-jawed, uneducated person. And the same goes in Germany. The same goes in England. The flag here in the United States is omnipresent. You can't escape the American flag. It's everywhere. And it gives this feeling of belonging. It gives this feeling of pride. I look at the American flag sometimes and I have tears welling up in my eyes because it's so amazing. It's so incredible. It's so fantastic. It stands for so much. It means so much. And to have that honoured the way that it's honoured, to have actual protocols surrounding the flag, again, something that other nations don't have. There are protocols about flying your flag at home. There are protocols about what you can do and what you can't do. The first time I ever saw a couple of friends holding an American flag, Americans, and they almost dropped it, and the scramble to make sure that it didn't touch the ground. That kind of stuff is just, I can't put it into words. It's just fantastic. It's the reason why I came here.
And good afternoon on this Super Bowl Sunday. This is In Depth on Book TV on C-SPAN 2 And our guest is author and commentator Nick Adams. He is the author of 5 books. America, the Greatest Good came out in 2010. Exceptional America, A Message of Hope from a Modern-Day De Tocquevill came out in 2012. The American Boomerang, How the World's Greatest Turnaround Nation Will Do It Again, 2013. Retaking America, Crushing Political Correctness, came out last year. And his most recent book, Green Card Warrior, My Quest for Legal Immigration in an Illegal System, also just came out. This is your chance to talk with author Nick Adams. Here's how you can do it. The phone numbers are on the screen. 202 is the area code, 748-8200. If you live in the East and Central time zones, 748-8201 for those of you in the Mountain and Pacific time zones. Now, if you can't get through on the phone lines or would prefer to use social media, we've got a couple different ways for you to do that as well. You can go to facebook.com/booktv. You'll see up at the top of our page a promotion for Nick Adams. You can leave a comment there. We'll be looking through that throughout the 3 hours. You can also send a Twitter. @BookTV is our Twitter handle. And finally, you can email, and that is booktv@cspan.org. We'll begin taking those in just a few minutes. Nick Adams, in your book, Retaking America, you write that I am a straight, white, educated, middle-class Christian male, and I'm sick of being told I'm not allowed to have an opinion.
Yeah, well,
Who
look,
told you that?
I am a straight, white, educated, middle-class male. I think that was the quote. And I'm proud to be a straight, white, educated, middle-class male. I'm very proud to be all of those things, and I think that all of those things are under attack. I think it's part of the reason why we saw the political miracle that we witnessed not that long ago. It's precisely because of the cultural attitudes that have been prevailing through political correctness. Look, I think it's very clear that people that have a certain, whether it's their gender, whether it's their colour, whether it's who they are, certain people have got a much more limited voice in today's society, in today's culture. And I think that that's very unfortunate. I don't want to be pigeonholed. I don't want to be boxed. I'm an individual, and I'm proudly individual. The thing that is so different about the United States is that it's the world's only non-collectivist society. America is an individualistic society. The individual is given priority over the collective. And that's why you're free to be the person that you want to be, and that's why that this country is full of characters. It's full of lively people. It's the reason why people like Donald Trump are elected to political office. Donald Trump couldn't be elected in any other country than America. But the variety of personality, the variety of ideas, it's also probably got to do with the size of the United States, 300 million people, means that there is so much on offer, and there's so many different people, and there's so many different things, and you really see it. I mean, you can walk down the street and you see people that are dressed in a way that you probably wouldn't dress, and you see people that are really out there, that have really got an engaging personality. I know that the first time that my father came to the United States, just last August, when Mum and Dad came over to help me get set up as a permanent resident here in the US, and we went to a Waffle House, and they were suffering from jet lag. I'd come a couple of weeks earlier, and Mum and Dad had just flown in, and their flight was delayed, so they'd come in in the evening previous, and we all kind of woke up at about 4 o'clock in the morning, and we said, well, what are we going to do? And I said, well, I want to show you this place called a Waffle House. And they said, all right, well, let's go. And so we went to the Waffle House, and we were there getting stuck into some great waffles and pancakes. Anyway, and this African-American gentleman stood up in the Waffle House and began to dance. Some song had come on, and he began to dance. And Peter, he was supremely talented. I mean, he was just dancing and moving and jiving, and it was a compelling performance. And at the very end of it, everyone in the Waffle House, my parents and I included, were applauding him. And my dad said to me, he said, you know, he said, it's incredible. In Australia, if someone got up and did that, you'd be calling the authorities. You would be. People would think that you were crazy. People would think that you were mad to just get up and in the middle of a restaurant and start singing and dancing. You know, people would say, this guy needs to be put in a straitjacket. But here, people were applauding and enjoying it. So it's a place where individualism really does thrive, and that has always been my gripe with the left and with political correctness. I think that they've had a war on the individual, and I'm proud to be who I am. I love it.
What did your parents think when you walked in the Waffle House and everyone yelled, "Hello, welcome"? Because that's one of the Waffle House's
yeah, absolutely.
trademarks.
Yeah, well, they were amazed. They were amazed. I mean, the very first stop, Peter, we had was a Whataburger, because that was right next to the hotel. And we went into the Whataburger and we were there, and the manager came over after we were waiting for our food, and she said, look, she said, I just happened to hear you speaking, she said, and you're not from around here? And we said, and you know, Mum and Dad said yes. Well, Nick's now an American, but we've come over here. And she said, well, I was in Louisiana, but I've come to Texas for opportunity, she said, and we proceeded to tell her that we were going to go apartment hunting. And anyway, at the very end of it, Peter, she was so nice and so friendly, and she came back with a little note, and on it was her name and her telephone number. She said, if I can help in any way to move you in or give you advice or do anything, I'm here for you. And I remember seeing tears welling up in my father's face. I mean, he'd just never seen such hospitality, such generosity. And that's really, I guess, the message that I've had for Americans now for the last 7 years coming here frequently, Peter. They are the nicest, most hospitable, most generous people you will ever come across. Period.
What are some of your disappointments about the U.S.?
Well, look, I think the United States is a place where technology is really front and center, and I guess I'm a little bit old-fashioned, so I don't use technology all that much. I find that Americans, much like the rest of the world, but Americans are addicted to social media. They're addicted to technology. They're addicted to their phones. That's something that I think is a big problem, and I see it as a direct threat to the American exceptionalism that is so clearly there. I think that it's created a bubble. I think that it's created an environment, an uninformed environment, where people are really only listening to an echo chamber, where they're really not getting out there and experiencing the America that I love. I don't like social media. I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
You're on Facebook, you've got a Twitter account, Nick Adams in USA, I believe it is.
Yeah, and my organisation flagusa.org, but only by necessity, Peter. Only because I have to, and only because we have to. Unfortunately, it's something that all organisations and businesses and people with a public platform need to have. But I hate it. I hate it because I think it's given people a voice that don't deserve it. I think it's made it impossible to be a giant. I think there are so many voices now, you can't determine who's real and who's not. I think that lightweights have been able to be elevated way past their station, purely by virtue of the fact that they have this social media platform. Before, you needed some charisma and some hustle and some drive and some colour and energy to you in order to be able to get a platform and to get ahead and to be taken notice of. Now all you need is a cat video that lasts 20 seconds, and all of a sudden you're an instant viral sensation and you've got 1 million people following you. And I think that people of substance really have lost out with social media. I don't want to speak in 140 characters. And that's another thing that I've never understood. I mean, I think it's full of electronic cockroaches that that kind of sit in their basement just tearing down people. I mean, even before today's show, when I went on the Facebook page where you were promoting this event, there was just comment after comment of people that don't know me, have got no idea who I am, don't know my story, have never spent a minute with me, who think that I'm the worst human being imaginable. And I think that social media really has got a very big role to play in that. It's divided the world. It's kind of set up all of these enemy camps when there shouldn't be. I think that anybody that goes and has a beer with me or a steak is going to love me.
From Retaking America, social media teaches us that there is a defect in our moral compass. What is that defect?
Can you say that again, Peter?
You write, social media teaches us that there is a defect in our moral compass. Yeah,
I think that it's very clear that people on social media, many people on social media, are negative. I mean, they don't understand. It's an opportunity to tear down people. It is used as a weapon to wield against those who they don't agree with or those who they are jealous of. Before, it was a matter of, you had to really work hard to go and find out information, to go and hurt somebody. Now it's very easy. Now you can, if you know that somebody's applying for a job, you can simply go and make sure that that employer knows all of the different posts that have been made or all of the appearances that you've had or whatever comments you've made, and suddenly you're unemployable or you can't make a living. And I think that that's awful. I mean, I'm too busy with my own life. I've never understood these people that don't have anything better to do that take such an interest in somebody else's. But I've had a lot of issues throughout the years, Peter, where people would write knowing, and I for a period of time, I stopped advertising where I was going to speak because people would write to places where I was going to speak to the organisers and they would tell the most hideous untruths about me and tell these people to not let me speak and you shouldn't have this guy as a speaker. And it's terrible. You feel defenseless. And you know that these people would never have the temerity or the confidence to confront you personally, but instead they hide behind a keyboard and just do their best to destroy your career, to sully your reputation, to create problems for you in your personal life. And like I say, I mean, it has elevated lightweights way beyond their station. And that goes for both conservatives and liberals and everyone in between. Before you had to be a person of substance. Now you don't need to be.
Milo Yiannopoulos is facing what you've just described when it comes to speaking on college campuses. UC Berkeley, of course, is the most recent example.
Sure. Look, lots of conservative speakers go through this. There is a war on conservative speakers. There's a war on conservative ideology. There's a war on people that are sufficiently confident and bold to enunciate those values and those virtues that are associated with conservatism. Those people are to be silenced. They are to be intimidated. They are to be harassed. They are to be cowed into silence. And suddenly when you have warriors of conservatism that are more than happy to withstand the leftist opprobrium directed to them and at them, then suddenly you're enemy number one. And I think when it comes to Milo, when it comes to Ben Shapiro, when it comes to a lot of these other people, myself included, we are the target of our confidence, we are the target of our boldness, we are the target of our belief system, and nothing could be more un-American or anti-American.
One more quote before we go to calls, and this is again from Retaking America, Crushing Political Correctness. All people are equal, but all cultures are not.
Well, that's definitely true, Peter. All human beings, all individuals are equal. I'm a Christian. I love all people. God commands you to love all people equally. And I do. And cultures, though, are something entirely different. There are very clear measurements that one can use in order to assess a culture's superiority, whether we want to talk about economic prosperity, whether we want to talk about freedom, whether we want to talk about someone's ability to rise above the circumstances of their birth, to go on and achieve whatever they want to achieve, whether we want to talk about religious freedom, whether we want to talk about women's rights. There are very, very clear measurements that we can employ in order to be able to determine where a country ranks. And the only reason why you wouldn't want to take a note of those measurements is if you subscribe to moral relativism, which essentially is the equivalent of smoking dope, which is basically saying that everything is the same, nothing is any better, nothing is any different. And I've always said that if you believe in everything, you believe in nothing. You've got to believe in something, and believing in something means excluding other things. And I think that America is a country that is the greatest country in the history of the world. In almost 5,000 years of recorded human history, we've never seen a country like America. We've never seen a culture like America. We've never seen people like Americans. From the agricultural age to the industrial age to the information age, whether we want to talk about all the things that we use every day, internet, email, GPS, supersonic flight, the jumbo jet, Kevlar, the Heimlich maneuver, birth control pills. I mean, every single thing in our lives have been the product of American genius, creativity, and innovation. None of that's come by accident. All of that is very deliberate, very intentional. It was set up that way by the most prescient and brilliant men to have ever walked this earth, who were our founders, who understood that the way to unleashing that human ingenuity, the way to unlocking that human creativity, was to make sure that men and women were as unencumbered as possible by the need for government approvals and red tape. And that's why people from Thomas Edison all the way through now to Elon Musk have really capitalized on that culture in America to create and produce things that people all around the world are using.
Is Donald Trump a disruptor?
I think he is a disruptor, but I think disruption is what America needs right now, Peter. I think that the Western world was really on a cliff. I think that America was teetering on the precipice of a European-style existence, a decaying, self-loathing, unpatriotic, avowedly secular place that's grey, mediocre, vanilla, where people aspire to mediocrity rather than greatness. And I think America was very much looking at that with a Hillary Clinton presidency, because that's the course that President Obama set the United States on. I think that's the vision that he had for America, for it to be like everywhere else. And finally, we have a president that has stood up for America, that's putting America first, that's asserting American values. And that kind of disruption to political correctness, that kind of disruption to the left's ideological nuttiness that has become so prevalent and unavoidable in today's society, is welcomed. And I think that we're going to see a renaissance, a patriotic, constitutional, conservative renaissance under President Trump, and hopefully that can be mirrored in the culture.
As a permanent resident, what's your status? Can that be revoked?
No, the only difference between an American citizen and an American permanent resident is that an American citizen gets to vote and can hold a United States passport. They're the only two differences. Otherwise, I am an American. I'm covered by the United States Constitution. I've got the right to bear arms. Let's say that I was on vacation in Germany and there was a terrorist attack and I went to the US Embassy in Berlin. I would be treated just like you would be. I would be considered an American because I'm a permanent resident. And on that note, I want to say, I mean, one of the distinctions that even conservatives make, and it's puzzled me here in the United States, I subscribe to the idea, Peter, that when you move somewhere, you become that place. The day that I moved to the United States as a permanent resident, the day that I started living here, working here, getting looked after here medically and everything else, I'm an American. I've got skin in the game. I call myself an American. I don't call myself an Australian. I'm an American. Now, have I taken the oath? Have I taken the pledge? No, I haven't. I will on the 29th of July 2021, which is the first day that I'm going to be able to. So how it works is that you have to be a permanent resident. You have to have your green card for a period of 5 years before you can become an American citizen. So I'm not able to be an American citizen up until then, but I call myself an American. I consider myself an American. I think that, and this goes for everybody, as soon as you come to a country, you become that country. If you're going to go and move to Australia permanently, you should be an Australian. If you're going to move to America permanently, you should be an American. And Americans shouldn't accept any other alternative.
Well, you're also an honorary Texan.
Yes, sir. I most certainly am. I'm very proud of that. My good friend Governor Perry, now Secretary Perry, appointed me an honorary Texan back in July of 2013. It's a day that I'll never ever forget. You know, I love all things Texas. I'm fond of saying that you don't live in Texas. Texas lives in you. And from belt buckles to jacked up pickup trucks to Blue Bell ice cream to chicken fried steak to Whataburger, I love America, Texas. I love the moxie, the swagger, the bravado of Texas and Texans. I love their merciless contempt for political correctness. I love boots. I love boots. And
we can show these boots, Fred. That would be great. These are cowboy boots.
These are cowboy boots. These are ostrich, full quill ostrich cowboy boots that I'm very proud of. It's
customized.
Customized. The only kind of boots, the only kind of footwear that I wear are boots. And again, I can't think of anything more unabashedly American than cowboy boots. I think that there is an air of confidence. There is an air of kicking butt rather than kissing it, which is associated with cowboy boots. And that's why I love Texas. That's why I'm thrilled to be an honorary Texan, although now, Peter, the honorary Texan badge is somewhat academic because I have a Texas driver's license, which means that I'm officially a Texan.
Nick Adams is our guest. Let's hear what our viewers have to say. Let's begin with Michael in Mahopac, New York. What's the name of your town, Michael?
Mahopac.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon. On 9/11, I was on active duty military leave from the NYPD. I was serving in a Rapid Deployment Army Infantry Unit in Fort Benning. And I'm sad to say I don't even think 9/11 was bad enough for this country. I want to ask him what he thinks it's going to take to wake this country up, both internally and externally, in terms of the threats we face.
Well, Michael, thank you very, very much for that question. It's an excellent question. I can tell you that I think that the country's already started to wake up. I can see it, I can feel it as somebody that's been coming here for the last 7 years. First as a frequent traveller, as a long-distance commuter, and now having lived here in the 7 months, I really feel that Americans are finally waking up. It was Winston Churchill that affectionately jibed that Americans always do the right thing after exhausting every other option. And I do think that there is a very deep-seated feeling among Middle America. I think that Middle America is finally mobilizing to fight the culture war. And I think that you should be hopeful about Americans waking up. I agree with you. There's a lot more waking up to be done. I think that we're going to see that waking up happen, and that's going to be the best thing, not just for America, but for the entire world, because what's good for America is good for the world. The world's fortunes travel with the U.S. When America's strong, the world is strong. When America's weak, the world is weak. And America will only be strong if Americans wake up.
Diane in Flippin, Arkansas. You're on Book TV on C-SPAN 2 with Nick Adams.
Oh, hi. Hi, Nick.
Hello, Diane.
I found you about 2 weeks ago. It was probably on C-SPAN, and you speak my heart.
Well, thank you.
And especially a while ago when you said when you hear the national anthem, you get tears in your eyes. That right there proves you do love our country. I'm an 82-year-old woman.
God bless you.
And I lived through the 60s and didn't think I ever would again. It's going to get rougher. It's going to get... And just stay true to your convictions, Nick. I think you will. And come and visit us in the Ozarks. I live around Bull Shoals. You'll love it.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you?
I have been. I have been to Arkansas. I do love Arkansas.
Oh, good.
I've spent a lot of time in Bentonville, Rogers, in the northwest part of the state. I've spent a little bit of time in Little Rock, but I'll make a point of coming to see you next time I'm in town. Okay,
when you're in Bentonville, just go straight east, and you'll hit Yellville and Flippin and Bull Shoals. But I've lived in Texas, and I know what you mean about the atmosphere in Texas. It's a feeling. It's different from anywhere else. You drive those wonderful highways there, windows open, the breeze coming. It's wonderful, and just like I say, it's going to get bad, and you're going to get hurt, but don't lose your faith. And I don't think you will. And one thing I want to ask you, do you think that it is lawful for George Soros and those people to send their people in and destroy our cities? They're the ones in the black masks and everything that come and get all the people upset, and then they destroy the buildings and the limousines and
All
things.
right, Diane, let's leave it there. Diane has been watching C-SPAN for years.
Diane, thank you so much for being such a loyal C-SPAN viewer, and thank you so much for calling in. Thank you for coming from Arkansas, a state very close to Texas, and I really appreciate your kind words. You're speaking my heart. And I'm very grateful. It's people like you that really have paved the way for someone like me to be able to come to America and do what I do. And the culture wouldn't be the culture that it is if it weren't for you. You're right. Things are going to get worse before they become better. The fight that we have in front of us is worse than anything that we've ever been through. And America's been through a lot. And it's worse now because for the first time, America's enemies are no longer only foreign. They're also domestic. There are people within the United States that are rooting for America's failure, that are rooting for America to become another European nation. And that's something that we've got to fight as much as we possibly can. In terms of the protests, I'm with you. I agree with you. I think it's shameful. I think it's disgusting. I think that people should be giving President Trump a chance. I can understand that he's not everybody's cup of tea, but he's only been in there 2 weeks. I think that everybody should agree that he's a patriot, that he loves this country, that he gave up a lifestyle and a career to go and do something that not many of us would be prepared to or could do. And I think that we need to show him some respect. And I think it's disgusting to have people like George Soros and others organising and mobilising effectively against America. It's un-American and it's anti-American.
You say you call it disgusting, but do you think it should be illegal?
No, it shouldn't be illegal. It definitely shouldn't be illegal, Peter. I mean, one of the rights guaranteed in the Constitution, the right to freedom of assembly, that's definitely something that we've got to cling to and hold dear to. But I think that it's poor form. I mean, I think I was here for the inauguration, and the very next day I was still in town for the Women's March. And these women were marching, and President Trump hadn't even been in office 24 hours. I really couldn't quite understand what rights he'd taken away from them or what he had done. And I think that there is a lot of bedwetting going on that's unnecessary, that's silly, and quite frankly should stop for the benefit of the nation. President Trump has gone in there to try and improve the place. Anybody that thinks that he's gone in there to not improve the place, that he's gone in there with bad intentions, well, quite frankly, that's just silly. It's silly. No American president, I think, goes in there deliberately trying to destroy the place. Although some people would argue that the last president perhaps was an exception. But certainly President Trump has gone in there to make the place better.
Mac Hurst from Dallas, Texas, emails in or posts on Facebook, please ask Nick Adams to expand on his comment about Donald Trump as the, if I remember correctly, leader of the free world.
Well, look, any president of the United States is the leader of the free world, is the leader of civilization as we know it. The presidency of the United States, Peter, is a moral beacon for the world. That person sets the tone for the culture and for what is acceptable and unacceptable, and really has a very significant role in shaping public opinion, not just in America, but worldwide. It's that famous saying, if you change America, you change the world. And it's true. If you change America, you do change the world. And let me just give you one example during President Obama's tenure. When President Obama assumed office in January of 2009, there were a handful of countries that had legalized same-sex marriage in the world. By the time he left 2 weeks ago, some 60 or 70 countries had legalized same-sex marriage. And I believe that's a direct result of the tone and the attitude that is put out there by the president, in this case President Obama. And so I'm very hopeful that moral clarity is going to be returned. The President of America is not just the President of America. The President of America is the president for everybody. And that's been the case because this is the country whose military is more powerful than the rest of the world's militaries combined. America is the guardian of liberty. Some people might not like that. Some people might not think that that's necessary. But the reality is that we wouldn't want anyone else to do that job, and somebody has to do that job. And I'm very thankful that it's America. I wouldn't want it to be China. I wouldn't want it to be North Korea. I wouldn't want it to be anybody else. So I think that the only country that is in that position, that's got the morality, and again, I mean, we go back to Alexis de Tocquevill, who famously said that America is great because America is good. When America ceases to be good, she will cease to be great. And I do think that there is a moral case for America to be the world's policeman, if you like. Again, it's not pretty, it's not sexy, it's not something that we really want to talk about. I know that a lot of Americans feel uncomfortable, even conservatives being referred to that way. But the reality is that the world needs a leader. Much like in any marriage or any partnership, somebody has to lead, and America has to lead.
So to go back to your moral clarity comment, should gay marriage be reversed in this country?
Well, look, I don't support same-sex marriage. I think that at the heart of the left is this chronological bigotry. This idea that because we live in 2017, somehow we're smarter and we're more educated and we're more refined and we know better. And everything else that has preceded us, they didn't know what they were talking about, they were bigoted, they were biased, and we should disregard and discard it completely. I think it's one of the things that really sets conservatives apart from liberals, is that mentality. And I happen to think that same-sex marriage is a direct assault on the traditional family. I think it's a direct assault on the cornerstone, the foundation of our civilization. And I personally don't support it. Whether or not I think the Supreme Court should reverse its decision that it made in 2015 is something that I probably need to put more thought into. But I can tell you that personally and as a Christian, I don't support same-sex marriage. I don't think that it's right. I believe in traditional marriage. I certainly don't believe in adoption for gay couples. I don't think that that's fair to the child. I know that a lot of these views are now badged as being out of date and old-fashioned and whatever else. But I am a social conservative. I do believe in the traditional family. I know that also puts me out of step with a lot of people my age. Millennials now have got completely different views to people of, if I can say, your generation and my parents' generation and others. But that's the way I was raised. That's what I believe in, and again, it's incredible. In 2004, when I was a student at the University of Sydney, when we would go recruiting for conservative causes, one of the causes that we would raise in recruitment was our opposition to same-sex marriage, which at the time was considered a completely out there, wacky, extreme idea of the left. In fact, Karl Rove, in the 2004 presidential election, in a bid to bolster conservative turnout, was putting it on the ballots in several key states so that evangelicals and conservatives would turn up and also vote for President George W. Bush's re-election. Fast forward to now, if you don't support same-sex marriage, it's considered like there's something wrong with you, that there's something not quite right. And so the culture has shifted entirely. I'm aware of that, but that doesn't change my personal convictions.
Next call for Nick Adams is Mark in Rifle, Colorado. Hi, Mark.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good. Hey, Nick, how are you?
G'day, Mark. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. It's a blessing to talk to you and get a chance to I've only got really 8 words for you, Mr. Adams. God bless you, and you're a great American.
Thank you very much, Mark. I really appreciate it. I will continue to work every day to make you proud. Thank you for your patriotism. Thank you for your love of country.
Victor, Canoga Park, California. Hi, Victor. You're on Book TV.
Yeah, hi, Nick Adams. How are you?
G'day, sir. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I found you on a Dennis Prager show.
Great.
Yeah, I really want to welcome you to America. And I was born in Nigeria. I came from Nigeria, came to the USA, became a citizen, and I really love this country. And you really spoke to my heart. And I'm very happy Donald Trump won the election because I was getting tired of, the America that I knew, that I read about, was going down under the previous president. And this political correctness, we were made, as a black person, you are made to hate the white people, hate the Republican, hate everything, hate America. They wanted you to remain a victim, So then I started listening, I started reading, listening to talk shows. Then this Prager really convinced me. When I look at the other side, I was thinking, wow, my eyes opened. And
Wow.
And I started liking America. So when you hate America, they want you to be, as a Democrat, they want you make you to hate America. So that I started appreciating America. And things are turning very good for me right now. And I'm very happy that Trump won the election. And God bless you, Nick Adams. Welcome to the USA.
Victor, what do you do in Canoga Park?
I work.
What kind of work?
I work in the health industry.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. That call was just inspiring. It was amazing. It was incredible. And I find that immigrants to the United States relate to me more than anyone and can really understand my message and my mission about spreading American values and fighting anti-Americanism more than anyone else, because we appreciate it. Sometimes a spectator sees more of the game. Sometimes it takes someone on the outside to remind you what you're like on the inside. And coming from Nigeria, what America is and what America means. And you also understand, and God bless you for this is the best place in the world for anyone and everyone to live. This is the best place in the world for a black person to live. This is the best place in the world for anybody who wants to rise above the circumstances of their birth to live in. Every time I speak to an elementary school, a middle school, or a high school, I tell those kids that the day that they were born in the United States, is the day that they won the lottery of life. And I am so sad to see the narratives peddled by the left, as you accurately point out, about, you know, if you're a black person, that this is a bad place for you to be. More black Africans have immigrated voluntarily to the United States, like you, than came as slaves. And almost no black person ever leaves the United States to go anywhere else. So this whole idea that this is a bad place, that this is a racist place, let me tell you something. America is the least racist, multiracial country in the world, period. And we have got to get that message out there. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for listening to my great friend and mentor, Dennis Prager, who wrote the foreword to my book, Retaking America. He is a great American, an incredible thinker, and you will be well served to continue listening to him. Thank you so much, sir.
From Retaking America, Nick Adams, you write, the greatest threat and challenge to American exceptionalism is political correctness.
It is, Peter. You know, most people think that political correctness is simply an imposition on what you can say or what you can't say. And that would be a problem because of our First Amendment. That would be more than a problem purely because of our First Amendment. But political correctness is infinitely more than that. Political correctness is a mindset, it's an attitude, it's a cultural lifestyle that mandates that you should strive for mediocrity rather than greatness, that you should kiss butt rather than kick it, that you shouldn't colour outside of the lines, that you should conform. Political correctness eliminates our confidence, it removes our patriotism, it strips us of our identity, it makes us boring. It makes us vanilla. It makes us pedestrian. It makes everybody the same. It's the great weapon of the collectivist. It's the great weapon of those that seek to equalize. It's the great weapon of those that seek to bring down successful people. Political correctness really comes along and paints everyone the same way. And it's an impingement on freedom. It's an impingement on the individual. And when I think about American exceptionalism, I say that it's patriotism, not relativism, that it's equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome, that it's God, not government, that it's e pluribus unum, not multiculturalism, that it is life, not death. It's about being bold, not being bland. These are the things that have always differentiated America from every other country, every other culture in the world, and yet political correctness would have every single one of those things: e pluribus unum, patriotism, individualism, equality of opportunity, boldness, all of that political correctness would have eliminated. So I think political correctness is the greatest threat to American exceptionalism easily.
Neville, Cleveland. Good afternoon.
I would like to switch the conversation back to Australia, if I may. If I visit Australia, I come across people from India, from China, from Malaysia, from South Africa, from New Zealand, from Fiji, and I could go on. Can your guests explain why there are so many migrants who have gone to Australia from those countries? What is it about Australia that's attracted them and made them choose to go there? Can you give me some kind of explanation about that, please?
Thank you, Neville.
Yeah, thank you, Neville. Look, that's a really good question. And you're right. If you go to Australia, there are lots and lots and lots and lots of immigrants to Australia. And that's because Australia is not a bad country. In many ways, Australia is a paradise. I'm fond of saying that, you know, if your only goal in life is to live a contented life measured by small steps, then really Australia is the perfect place for you. And that's what many immigrants have come there. Now, recently, many immigrants have come to Australia. Many immigrants have come to Australia because they want to be on the gravy train. Australia has a very generous welfare state, and these people are really coming for the easy ride as opposed to America, where they're coming for opportunity and a better life. So there are differences in terms of the reasons why people go to Australia and America, but absolutely, Australia is a place that is free. It's not as free as America, but it's free. It's democratic. The weather's good. It's a pleasant place to be, and many people, depending on their personality, find Australia more comfortable than the United States because there is not that much diversity in opinion. The culture is very different. People are much more laid back. They're not as energetic. And some people really gravitate towards that. Somebody like me, who is all about energy and all about optimism and all about pulling off the impossible and all about hustling and working as hard as I possibly can, I come here and I love it because everybody is just so dynamic. Everyone is just so alive here. These are the most business-oriented people here in the United States. Networking and opportunities and all of that kind of stuff is, I mean, it's palpable.
Martin, Dayton, Ohio, please go ahead with your question or comment for Nick Adams.
Hello, yes. Well, first of all, welcome. We are always grateful and welcoming, and we should be, to immigrants to this country, just like other callers have said. That's what makes our country great. It always has, and hopefully always will. I'm a teacher. I have that in my school, and it says immigration made America, and that's true. My people, most of them came around 1900. You've come just a few years ago, and we're so grateful to have you. Even though I have a different political view, probably in most aspects, but nevertheless, it's great to have people from other kinds that come here. That's what makes our country great. I would just say it is a very bold assertion to say that you know what we need, having only been here for a short amount of time. And I understand the outsider's point of view is very important, and that's like De Tocquevill said that, and so he had the outsider's point of view. However, it is a bold assertion. So I would just advise, maybe, if I could, in a humble way, just keep your mind open and reach out. Political correctness in an extreme is a bad thing. Political incorrectness in an extreme is a bad thing. And that's the problem that we're having, as I see it, is that we have speakers on both sides that are the loud ones, and in the middle, the average person, that's the person you want to latch onto and get to know, even if they're not your political persuasion. I have many Republican friends. Most of my friends are Republican. We agree to disagree and have great conversations. But I would just ask one thing in a timely way. If you know, and maybe you don't because you were a young pup at the time, but we had the worst terrorist attack of all time in 2001 in this country, and there were 19 men that did this. And what two countries did they come from, if you would?
Okay, Martin, we'll get to that in your bold assertion comment. What do you teach in Dayton?
I teach English, and the reason why I ask that is to go to what's being called the Muslim ban countries where those men came from are not on
what are the two countries, Martin?
Well, Egypt is one of them.
Egypt
and Saudi Arabia.
Yes, there were 15 Saudis.
Okay.
And
all right, I think we got the
Egyptians.
point. What's your comment for Martin in Dayton?
Well, first of all, I want to say to Martin, thank you for calling, and I appreciate your comments. I really appreciate the civil way that you spoke to me. That's unfortunately becoming very rare in life today in America and right around the world. So I'm very grateful for that. You really embody the American tradition of respecting somebody else's opinion, and that means a lot. So thank you for that. Look, I understand that it's a bold assertion for me to come, somebody who's only lived here for 7 months permanently and obviously has come a whole bunch of times before for limited amounts of time. I can appreciate that you think that what I'm saying and what I'm doing and what I'm declaring is somewhat bold. I'd like to think that being bold is an American value, and I'd like to think that as a young man who I'd also like to think is at the peak of my powers mentally, has been able to really sit down and analyse and diagnose and assess and dissect what's going on in the world and in America, and has kind of really been politically active since the age of 19, and remembers the George W. Bush presidency and lived through the Obama presidency and was an integral part of the 2016 campaign. I'd like to think that there are some insights that I can share. I think the greatest problem facing America today, Martin, is that we haven't passed on what it means to be an American. We haven't taught American values, and as a result, many of our young don't know what it means to be an American. They've got no idea about the limited government dimension. They've got no idea about the moral dimension. And I think it's important that we not only teach that, but I think it's important that we make the case for America robustly, swiftly, unapologetically, and aggressively. And that's what I am doing. With respect to your last question, and perhaps, Peter, you can help me here. What the question was. Why was he asking the question?
He was talking about the immigration executive order that President Trump put into effect. Did not include Saudi Arabia or Egypt.
Or Pakistan.
But the two countries he was talking about
Yes.
were the 9/11 attackers.
Well, look, and I hope that President Trump in the coming days, weeks, months, whatever it is, according to intelligence, obviously, but I would hope that he would include Saudi Arabia on that list, that he would include Pakistan on that list. Absolutely. I don't think his presidential executive order went far enough. That's my humble opinion. But I'm all about protecting America. I'm all about protecting Christianity. I'm all about protecting the state of Israel. Three things that are incredibly close to my heart. And I do remember 2001. I do remember September 11. It was a watershed moment for me. I was 17 years old, 17 and 6 days actually, because my birthday's on the 5th of September. And I remember my mum walking in very early in the morning. Obviously, when the planes hit the World Trade Center, it was 11 o'clock at night. And I was asleep, but the very next morning at crack of dawn, my mum came into my room and said, "Nick, do you know what's going on? Have you heard?" And I would find out, and that really had a great impact on galvanizing the pro-American sentiment that I already had, but it really made me realize that this was history's way of bestowing a role upon my generation to stand up and fight for the United States of America, that America was a proxy for Western civilization, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
Nick Adams, when somebody says diversity is our strength, what do you take from that comment?
Well, they're weasel words, Peter. Diversity is our strength. You know, I mean, that's not really a powerful statement. That's not really anything that you can take home with you. Diversity is our strength. Well, what does that mean? I mean, I think diversity is a means to an end. It's not an end in and of itself. And I think unity is far more important. It's great to have diversity, fantastic to have diversity. We become richer because of diversity. But if we're unable to unite that diversity, then really all we're going to have is a whole bunch of groups and pockets of people that are going to be doing their own thing. And that's not what we need. I mean, we want Americans to be united. We want people to be united. And unfortunately, you know, a line like diversity is our strength. I mean, that sounds wonderful, and let's go and all sing Kumbaya around the campfire. But the reality is that I think it's far more important that we see diversity as a means to an end, as opposed to an end in and of itself. As I said before, if you believe in everything, you believe in nothing. And I don't want people to believe in everything. I want people to believe in certain things. And I think those things are America and the American way of life.
Gary's in Exeter, California. Hi, Gary.
There. Hi, Nick. How you doing?
G'day, Gary. Great state.
California.
Yes, sir.
My comment, the main point I would like to make, I'm a 76-year-old white male, etc. My main point is that the left, the impact and the influence of the left is, as you have very well pointed out, extremely pervasive and very strong. On the one hand, discussion and controversy are part of our cultural heritage. Controversy started back at George Washington's second term for office, and his greatest adversary was Thomas Jefferson. I believe that the wellspring and the springboard for this left-wing approach to living starts with our educational system. I experienced it. I left home as a 20-year-old, reared by parents who were politically definitely on the right. And after 2 years in the area of San Francisco, my political beliefs had shifted to the left. I then came home, took a job as a police officer in a very tough city in Orange County, and watched the games people play, watched and learned and saw that many of the burglars were also welfare recipients, using everything they could. I saw people who didn't work because they didn't wish to work, and that shifted my politics back to the right and even more strongly. An anecdote I can give you about political correctness is in later years of my career, I directed and was in charge of a police training program at a local community college. And incidentally there, I kept my beliefs quiet because it would jeopardize my job, because the people who were higher up at most times in the college were very much left-wing oriented people. And so you just keep your mouth shut. And the very least you would face would be derision. At any rate, the anecdote is this: that we had a new president come in. He was a high roller from Orange County, and a member of our board of trustees, this is the governing body for the college, made a comment in a trustees meeting and referred to colored people. Well, unfortunately, that was not the term du jour. Colored people is not a term to be used if you're politically correct. And I didn't notice anything until the next morning. That new president, had the cheek to send a memo out to the entire management team saying that he was so upset by this person's use of the term colored people that he couldn't sleep, and he just condemned it. And this is one of his bosses. So this is the idea of just how strong that political orientation is.
Hey, Gary, we're going to have to leave it there. Let's hear from Nick Adams.
Well, look, Gary's right. Gary, the education system, academia is where political correctness is most rife, most out of control. We see it almost every day. There is seldom a day that goes by that we don't turn on the television to hear about another story of politically correct insanity happening in the classroom. It doesn't only happen at colleges, which is obviously the focus particularly of the media, but it happens even more regularly, I would submit, in elementary, middle and high schools. And it's why I've set up an organisation called FLAG, the Foundation for Liberty and American Greatness, which is an educational organisation which goes into elementary, middle and high schools talking to kids about what makes America special, what makes America different, why is the Constitution the best political document ever written, what would the world look like without the United States of America, what would the world be like today had it not been for American leadership in the 20th century, what all has America given the world, why has it been an unparalleled force for good in this world. And we seek, FLAG seeks, to counter the army of anti-American activists that often masquerade as teachers that are teaching our children European values. that are not passing down what it means to be American, that are using red pen edits to history in order to be able to promote America's failings and America's mistakes, which undoubtedly America has. I mean, America, much like any country or culture, is not perfect, but it is the best thing that we have, and the world without America is one that we don't even want to contemplate. It's been an unparalleled force for good in this world, and unfortunately political correctness has really eliminated that being taught. That's why I set up flagusa.org, to take on political correctness in classrooms, like you say, and as a teacher, you know all about it. It's just awful what education has become.
And in his book, Retaking America, Crushing Political Correctness, Nick Adams writes that these schools and universities are not seeking to protect students. They are turning students into witch-hunting activists, eagerly prepared to arbitrarily define and expose every instance of perceived injustice. We've got about an hour and a half left with our guest on In Depth, author and political commentator Nick Adams. 202 is the area code for all of our numbers. 748-8200 for those of you in the East and Central time zones. 748-8201 if you live in the Mountain and Pacific time zones. Now, if you can't get through on the phone lines, still want to make a comment, we've got some social media avenues for you as well. You can go to Facebook, facebook.com/booktv. You can make a comment there. You'll see a promotion for Nick Adams on our page, and you can make a comment underneath that. You can also go to Twitter. @BookTV is our Twitter handle. And finally, you can send an email to booktv@cspan.org. Well, it was in 2006 that Nick Adams appeared on a program in Sydney called Insight. This is from SBS TV in Australia. We want to show it to you now.
First of all, can I say that I hope that everyone in this studio feels Australian and is proud to be Australian, because I think I can think of nothing better than being Australian.
What does feeling Australian mean?
Feeling Australian, Jenny, is recognising that we live in a paradise. This is one of the best known secrets in the world. We live in a country that is relaxing, accommodating and tolerant. And I find it very disappointing that there are people in this studio that have expressed disenchantment with Australia. How can we possibly be a strong nation if we're a divided nation? If we're a nation that looks at ourselves and says, well, we don't really like this, we're not really good at that.
It's dog-whistling politics. You know, this rhetoric from the government at the moment about Aussie values, it's talking white values and Christian values. Yeah, it's dog-whistling, and it's disgusting, and it is one of the most embarrassing things that's happened in public life in this country for a very long time. Australia is a country terrified of Islam at the moment. Why? Well, it's very good politics.
Okay, Nick?
Jenny, I think the real issue here is the issue of multiculturalism. And it's an issue that everyone's very tentative in discussing, because generally in any debate on multiculturalism, it's generally clouded by a chance of being racist or uneducated and anything like that. But I think the very reason why this has come to the fore and why we're having a debate on this is that at the moment we have a situation in Australia where there are certain people that live in Australia that feel more strongly about or have a greater affinity for the country that their parents came from or the country that they came from. And what this does is this is a problem in that it makes loyalty be divided. And there are people in this country that really don't know which way to go. And I think that multiculturalism has achieved everything it can possibly achieve. I think from here on in it's a downward spiral, and I'll tell you why.
You think there are enough high risk?
I think...
I think we really need to look at Australia as a family, Jenny. An extended, blended, modern family. It is no longer just the mother, the father and the two children growing up in the way that it did. We've let in new family members, and when you let in new family members, they bring in different values, different ways of thinking to how the nucleus thinks, and in order to be a happy extended blended family, you have to expand to accommodate them. And just because we might have had values in the 50s that subsided and subsisted then. If you have a policy that embraces new people, you have to embrace their new thoughts, and society's values have to expand to accommodate that.
Okay, Nick?
Jenny, the fact is that there were values in place when these people came to this country, and there was something attractive about those values. And we all know what it is. We've already said Australia is a paradise.
It was
Okay, Nick. I'd like to put your theory.
It was the chance to be able to speak without being shot in the street.
You're allowed
It's
to.
a difference.
We're tolerant.
Nick Adams, we also showed our viewers some of your favorite books and influences, and you have down as one of your favorite books, Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky.
Well, you've always got to know the enemy, Peter, if you're going to beat the enemy. And I think that that's required reading for any patriot that cares about the welfare of their country. I think it's required reading for anybody that wants to understand how the left operate. It basically lays out a strategy, a roadmap, a series of tactics for people to use in order to change the culture and transform the media narrative. And one of the things I think that the left have always been a lot better at than conservatives is understanding that culture trumps politics, that culture is more powerful than politics, that political elections and political changes have an effect, but really the major prize is the culture. And if the culture stays the same, but you have a conservative president or you have a conservative House of Representatives or Senate in there, then really nothing changes. The real change is going to happen, the real transformation is going to happen when you have the culture. And the left very successfully, deliberately, over the last 4 or 5 decades, have infiltrated surreptitiously the education system, Hollywood, and every other mainstream cultural institution you can think of, the media. And as a result, now they own the culture. And we are refugees, essentially, within the culture. And if we don't do something about it, that's only going to get worse.
Some of your inspirations include your father and somebody named Enid Blyton. Who is Enid Blyton?
Enid Blyton is the most prolific children's author ever, I believe. She was a British children's writer. Unfortunately, I don't think that her work, the one place where her work really wasn't all that prominent was here in the United States, because I've yet to meet an American that knows who she is. But she's the author of The Famous Five and The Secret Seven, and these are the Five Find Outers, and These are basically the children's books that my father grew up with, that kids in Australia grew up with, that children in all of the other British influenced countries in the world read. And she was just an amazing, amazing writer. Unfortunately now, because she came from a different time period, they're editing her books to make them more politically correct. They're changing names, they're assigning different duties from girls to boys as to not come across sexist. Her work has been banned in libraries, her work has been removed in bookstores, and we're talking about a lady that wrote more books than anybody you could imagine, whose work was translated into 60 different languages. I actually dedicated a chapter to Enid Blyton in Retaking America. And, you know, I loved reading, and she was part of the reason why I loved reading so much. I loved reading so much that I wrecked my eyes, and I had to go and get laser eye surgery a few years ago. But my parents would command me to turn off the light and go to sleep, and so I would always have a torch that I had hidden next to me in the bed, and so as soon as the light was turned off, I'd be reading like that. And I think a bit too much of that led to my eyes being messed up. So, but no, look, I have no regrets. I love Enid Blyton. She was incredible. All adventure stories, perfect for anyone. I'm going to make sure that my children read her books.
What did your parents do in Australia?
Well, my father is a mathematician. He's got a degree in pure mathematics. He's been a mathematics teacher for a long time. My mother is a gerontological nursing specialist, so she is the manager of a big aged care facility back in Australia. But on both my maternal and paternal sides, there is a history of, they were retailers, they were traders. And so I have that small business background entrenched in me as well. And, you know, my mum and dad really, I think, are to be credited with everything that I am. They're watching right now. They're live streaming from Australia, C-SPAN 2. So, you know, they are, when I want to thank them, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here, and they've always believed in me, and they've always supported me, and they never turned me down once. Whenever I wanted to do more courses in public speaking or reading or anything extracurricular to improve myself, they never ever complained. In fact, they would encourage it. So I'm the man who I am today because of my mum and dad. And the only thing about moving to America that I don't like is that, unfortunately, they're not able to be here with me in the United States. Once I become a citizen, then they'll automatically be granted green cards because they're immediate family members. But unfortunately, for the next little while, I don't have mum and dad closely, but they do come and visit.
They can come in and out of the country
easily. Oh, sure, they can visit
they?
As tourists, yes, absolutely.
And how's your dad's health?
Dad's health is good. In Green Card Warrior, I wrote about some of the trials that he was having. He was born with a hole in his heart, an ASD, an atrial septal defect, I think it's called, and that went undiagnosed until he was in his mid to late 30s, and then he had to have open heart surgery to do that. And then obviously as you get older, different things happen, and he loves fruit. He loves fruit. And when I say he loves fruit, I mean, I know you look at me rather blankly, like that's not something that's anything noteworthy, but he loves fruit so much that he got diabetes from eating fruit. He's not someone who has candy, he's not someone that does any of that stuff, but he eats so much fruit that the sugar in the fruit gave him diabetes. And so, but he's doing well. He's doing well. I understand that he's looking after himself a little bit more, and my mum has got him on a good diet. So so they're well, and I know that they're looking forward to coming back and visiting me and perhaps splurging on some burgers and fries and chicken fried steak and all the good stuff.
Their Prime Minister, Turnbull, was
Yes.
in the news recently. How big of a story is that down in Australia?
Massive. huge. Story worldwide, and I don't think that anyone ever thought it was going to get that big, but it did really spiral out of control. There is a backstory to that, Peter. So Malcolm Turnbull became the Prime Minister back in September of 2015, and he effectively stole the Prime Ministership from our previous Prime Minister, Tony Abbott. Tony Abbott was subject to a party coup within the Parliament that saw him replaced as leader by Malcolm Turnbull. And I think it's fair to say that Malcolm Turnbull could never have won an election by the people to become Prime Minister. So effectively he stole the Prime Ministership from Tony Abbott. Tony Abbott was a Conservative. Malcolm Turnbull is a moderate Conservative, for want of a better phrase. He's milquetoast. He's very, very wishy-washy. He really is more of a, to put it in terms that your viewers would understand, he's more of a Democrat than he is a Republican. But he's in the Republican Party. And I think you call them a rhino here. So he's a rhino, and he came up with this, this deal was brokered between Malcolm Turnbull and President Obama and Secretary Kerry, that they would take, that the United States would take 1,250 illegal immigrants from Australia that were intercepted, trying to come to Australia the wrong way, trying to come illegally, and had been placed in detention on offshore islands where we hold people until which time we can process them properly. And also, as a result of what Tony Abbott, the previous Prime Minister, had brought in, Australia has the world's toughest border protection measures. So essentially, Peter, what happens is, if you come to Australia the wrong way, if you come illegally, then you never ever get to become an Australian. You have two choices. We either pay for you to go home, or you have to wait in detention for an undisclosed period of time, could be years, until your turn in the queue, your turn in the line comes up for your application to be looked at. So anyway, 1,250 of these people that come from the very countries that are on President Trump's executive order travel ban, 1,250 of these people would come to the United States and be resettled in the United States, become permanent residents of the United States. So, you know, we were talking before about what I had to go through to become a permanent resident. So these 1,250 people that came to Australia illegally, that were not wanted by Australia, were going to be taken in by the United States. Now, I can't see any upside for the United States in that deal whatsoever. We have Muslim lawbreakers that were illegal immigrants that Australia said, we don't want you, and America's going to take those people. I've never quite worked out why that deal would have been done, but nevertheless, that deal was done by President Obama and and Secretary Kerry with Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. Well, one thing happened to spoil all of that. Donald Trump unexpectedly won the election on the 8th of November 2016. And 5 days later, the decision was made by Malcolm Turnbull to come out and formally announce this deal that had been made a couple of months earlier with President Obama and Secretary Kerry. And really, it was because Malcolm Turnbull was looking for a way of boxing in President-to-be Trump, of presenting the deal as a fait accompli, as a done deal, kind of forcing his hand by making it public, even though Malcolm Turnbull knew that Trump had campaigned vigorously, viciously, some would say, on the whole idea of keeping the very types of people out that this deal would have come in. And as a result, now when the discussion happened between President Trump and Malcolm Turnbull, it wasn't pretty, because I think that President Trump knew exactly what Malcolm Turnbull had tried to do. There's been a lot of there's been a lot of discussion that perhaps Malcolm Turnbull was egged on by President Obama and Secretary Kerry. We don't have any evidence of that, but he was egged on to go out and make this announcement because it was considered the only way that we could actually to force President Trump's hand. So as a result, now we have a relationship that's kind of up in the air. I think that the Australian-American alliance is more than safe, but that's what happens when you play with fire, when you try a trick and it backfires. And why Malcolm Turnbull was ever betting on somebody who prides himself on being a tough negotiator and who had made keeping those types of people out as a central part of his whole campaign, why Malcolm Turnbull would think you could box someone like that in, I don't know.
Nick Adams is our guest on Book TV on C-SPAN 2's In-Depth program. America, the Greatest Good came out in 2010. That was his first book. Exceptional America came out in 2012. The American Boomerang, How the World's Greatest Turnaround Nation Will Do It Again, 2013. Retaking America, Crushing Political Correctness, came out last year, as did Green Card Warrior, My Quest for Legal Immigration in an Illegal System. John in Davenport, Florida, thanks for holding. You're on with author Nick Adams.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. First, I want to thank C-SPAN. This will be my second call in, I think, about 20 years. The last time I called, and I watched C-SPAN since the beginning, was the only time I've ever seen Brian flummoxed. And that was when you guys had asked the viewers to vote on their most popular journalist in America, and he was, like I say, flummoxed by Charlie Reese of the Orlando Sentinel during that conversation. To Nick, welcome, my friend.
Thank you, John.
I'm glad you're here.
Thank you, sir.
Immersed in the culture of the Republic of Texas, you will get a quick course on Americanism there. So it's a wonderful thing. As a matter of fact, I was just watching Texas Country Reporter before their show came on. So if you've ever seen that, it's a great show. But I want you to know I've watched you over the last couple of years on C-SPAN, and I'm proud to call you an American, and it's sort of sad that we have to have outsiders who really realize what our country is about. Yourself, Dinesh D'Souza. You guys ought to go on tour, by the way. You both speak so well for this country. My question, I guess, to be short here, is my contention has been that the progressives have got control of our education system 100 years ago, and they have steadily got to the point that they've corrupted Americanism, patriotism, and our children. And I noticed when I was watching you a couple of weeks ago, I think you were on C-SPAN, I can't remember where you were, but you had announced your new program for education. And my question is, you're up against the teachers union and all those kinds of things. How do you see that going? I'm sort of astonished that you could possibly get invited to a school because I can't imagine the schools would be friendly anywhere except Texas, maybe. How's that program going?
All right, John, thank you.
Well, John, thank you very, very much for that question. I appreciate you calling in for only the second time and also being a great C-SPAN viewer, and I'm glad you had the chance to tune in to me a couple of weeks ago. I was in Silicon Valley speaking to the Conservative Forum over there on the West Coast and speaking to a great group of patriots in what you would probably not expect to be a place very hospitable to people like me and people like you. But look, the education system has been corrupted. The education system has been compromised. When I began the Foundation for Liberty and American Greatness, FLAG, the website, which is flagusa.org, people said to me, John, that it was the best idea that they'd ever heard, but there's no way in the world you're ever going to get into any schools. And I've got to tell you that we are 33-0, and we've only spoken at a handful of Texas schools and a handful of public schools. And a handful of private schools. The rest have been public schools. So out of the 33 schools that we have spoken at, 29 have been public schools, and just 4 have been private schools. We haven't had any difficulty getting in yet. I'm sure that's going to change. I'm sure you're right that the teachers' union and a whole bunch of other people are going to be breathing down our necks and declaring us all kinds of different things. But we're ready for that fight. We're ready for that fight, and in many ways we welcome that fight, John, because I'm sick of playing defense. I want some offense. I am sick of being dictated to, and I'm sick of these guys playing unopposed. We're going to turn up, we're going to show up, and we're going to fight. And we're going to do whatever we've got to do to make sure that the young in this country are patriotic, that they love their country, and that they're prepared to stand up for their country and spread the American value system, the greatest value system ever manufactured by humanity, right around the world. And we're going to do it, and we're going to do it unapologetically. Let the teacher unions get in the way. Let teachers get in the way. Let the media get in the way. Let them vilify us and humiliate us and libel us and slander us and defame us. It's nothing that we haven't been through before. It's nothing that we haven't seen before. But I tell you what they haven't seen. They haven't seen our resolve. They haven't seen our will. They haven't seen us punch the bully in the nose. And that's what we're going to do. And we're going to do it proudly. We're going to do it unabashedly. And I'm going to keep going into those schools with as many other people as I can and making sure that these American children are ready to be handed the baton of keeping and preserving and perpetuating the American idea. And it's not just me who's working with flagusa.org. I've got Colonel Alan West. I've got Dr. Ed Fulner, the founder of the Heritage Foundation. I've got Fox News contributor and host Pete Hegseth, John Sullivan, the executive producer of 2 of the Dinesh D'Souza films. I've got Dennis Prager, conservative radio titan out of California. I've assembled an all-star cast, and we are committed to making sure that we stand up for America, that we are a voice for America in the culture, that we are not going to stand idly by, as has been done up until now, and just let anybody and everybody use America as a punching bag. America's days as a punching bag are over, John.
Anthony Ortel, San Rafael, California. Email, Alexis de Tocquevill wrote, "Despotism often presents itself as the repairer of all the ills suffered, the support of just rights, defender of the oppressed, and founder. Is President Trump a despot?"
Absolutely not. No, President Trump he's no despot, he's no dictator, he's no Hitler, and quite frankly, much like the left do when they will call someone a misogynist or a sexist for saying something as opposed to doing something, they do a real disservice to legitimate sexual harassment. And in this case, they do a real disservice to calling President Trump a dictator and a despot. They do a real disservice to the people that actually suffer under despots, the people that actually suffer under dictators. And President Trump is a leader. He's an alpha male. He's somebody that says what he thinks. He's somebody that is going to make the case for America. And again, I think all of those things should be welcomed. All of those things should be considered positively. Let's wait and see what happens.
Mary's in Valley Springs, California. Hi, Mary. You're on Book TV with Nick Adams.
Hi there. Thank you for having me on. I came across this channel actually by mistake. I was using my remote control and dialed in the wrong numbers. I'm so glad I did. I wanted to say he was talking about Mr. Adams. You were talking about your patriotism, and that was the kind of patriotism I was raised on growing up as a child. I'm here from California, and I was not raised under liberal teachers, and my parents were always patriotic and instilled it in us. And we sang patriotic songs in school, and it was great. And I always felt that I could do anything I wanted to do, no matter who I was. A boy or a girl, it didn't matter. I was an American and very proud of it. So it's great to have people on the outside come in and tell us what we're all about, because that's exactly how I've always felt.
Mary?
Yeah?
Mary, 2 questions. Hillary Clinton won over 60% of the California vote. If you take California out of the national equation, Donald Trump won the popular vote because she beat him by about 4 million votes out there. How do you explain that? And what about California seceding?
I'll be happy to explain that. If you look at the counties in California that voted for Donald Trump, I believe he beat her by the counties and not by the population, as you say, because most of the population is down south in Los Angeles, and then that population around San Francisco, very concentrated areas. But if you look at the map of the counties that voted for Donald Trump, including the county I live in now, Calaveras County, we voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. So when he was campaigning for the electoral college vote, that's kind of like the same thing, where all the states have a say in it. So when you look at all the states that he had won, that's how he won. That's how he ran his campaign. Now, if it was strictly on popular vote, he would have campaigned strictly in California. He would have campaigned strictly in New York. And maybe he would have changed and he would have won then too. But that's not how the game was played. So it's really not fair to bring that up. And also California, they found just in Palo Alto, voter fraud, that a lot of illegals had voted. They just took one county as a sampling just to look into it, and they found out, I think it was Palo Alto or Santa Clara, where a lot of illegal votes were put forth for Hillary Clinton. And then they stopped sampling after that.
So Mary, what do you think about the secession movement in California?
I'm not for it at all. I love California. I love all of California. We've been hijacked temporarily. But I don't believe in seceding from the Union at all. I think California contributes to the Union very much so. It's our produce and freedom of thought and our inventions we have here and our athletes that go to the Olympics. There's no reason for California to secede. We're part of America.
Thank you, ma'am.
And the 5th largest country in the world, 5th largest economy in the world. Thank you very much, Mary, for that. I appreciate it. Look, you're right. The school days that you happen to be so blessed to enjoy and experience, unfortunately, they're very, very different. They're long gone now. And that's what my organisation, that's what FLAG is trying to do. We are trying to make sure that we bring back all of those things that you were so lucky to experience, that you know to be part of the school system, something ingrained in it. That's what we're working on, and we're working on doing that specifically with programs, incorporating American exceptionalism into curriculums, teaching teachers and school administrators how to be more American, how to promote Americanism. And there's nothing better to do that than really looking back at how it used to be done. In many ways, we don't really need to reinvent the wheel. We just simply have to rediscover the recipe. And that's what we're doing. We want to make that recipe well known. We want to make sure that every school is promoting American values and patriotism. That's what we want. I agree with you. California is a beautiful state. It's the 5th largest economy in the world. It produces lots of Olympic athletes. It's unfortunate that it has the politics that it has, but it shouldn't secede. It should stay in the Union, and I think that we really have got to focus on unity. We've got to focus on staying strong, because that's the only way that we are going to get through what we are currently going through.
Will's calling in from Lincoln, Delaware. Hi, Will.
Oh, Peter, thank you so much. I've been a big fan of yours for over 20 years, since Brian actually interviewed Michelle Malcolm for book notes. So to segue from that over 20 years, this is a thrill all around. First-time caller.
Welcome.
Good day to you, Nick.
G'day, how you doing?
I've been to Australia, been to Brisbane and Surfers Paradise, etc., for the F-111 place, came down from Japan. And my questions are related specifically to your idea of the moral compass and your criterion. I heard you very early in the program talking about time and how important it is for so many people, and the distinction you made between now and the future, and how Americans are future-oriented versus other people. When living in Japan in the 70s, Milton Friedman had gotten there just before I did, where he was able to change the culture there significantly with his book, Freedom to Choose. You have quite a number of icons, that have just been listed. I'm wondering, with your name being Adams, if you have an interest in the U.S. founding fathers like Sam Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and for more contemporaries, Ayn Rand's been a bit of a phenomenon with her film Fountainhead, as well as her books Atlas Shrugged, etc. And because you talked about individualism being the second major criterion that I heard you bring out conceptual thinking-wise, I'm wondering, are there other people like Milton Friedman, other organizations you talked about, Heritage Foundation in particular, Ed Fulner? I come from the Foundation for Economic Education. You're talking about FLAG. We celebrated our 50th anniversary when I was the assistant to the president there in 1996. We want to see you have that same kind of success. Have you looked into other organizations that would be allied naturally to you? The second thing is in regards to that criterion. You've mentioned those things like individualism and time. When I travel throughout Asia and Europe, etc., choice is a big thing that's respected for Americans. And the last question is in regards to rule of law versus rule of man and markets. How are those for you, Nick?
Okay, well, there's a lot there. You're a very informed viewer, and thank you for calling in. This is your first call. I hope it's not going to be your last. Martin, look, what I want to say to you is that we are definitely partnering up. FLAG is partnering up with other like-minded organisations like Turning Point USA, like the Heritage Foundation, like the Centennial Institute. There are a myriad of organisations right across America that are doing remarkable things. And on that note, when we're talking about what makes America different and a lot of those measurements that you were alluding to, and you mentioned as well that you worked at an organisation that celebrated its 50th anniversary back in '96, the Foundation for Economic Freedom. Can I tell you that those kind of foundations, the Foundation for Liberty and American Greatness, the Heritage Foundation, your foundation, no other country has organisations like that. No other country has the equivalent of a 501c3 advocacy group where people right around the country that believe in your mission and want to support your objectives and your projects actually give you financial support to help you. That is a uniquely American thing, and you can't even contemplate anything more American, really. I mean, it's just a perfect representation of the interest, the unparalleled interest that America takes in issues, in the future, and everything else. So I just want to make that point, that an organisation like mine and like the ones we've been talking about are only possible in the United States of America. I think that it's an embodiment of American exceptionalism. You talk about Japan, and what I want to tell you about that is that when you look at all the countries that America has had a hand in either rebuilding or influencing, whether it's South Korea, whether it's Germany, whether it's Japan, they're all economic powerhouses. And they're all capitalist beacons. And, you know, it's further example, I think, of America's soft power. It's further example of America's positive influence on the world. America really does have that Midas touch. Anything that it touches turns out really, really well. And it's something that I wish that more people around the world would be conscious of. I have been a reader all of my life of conservative philosophy and different conservative books, all the way, obviously, from Edmund Burke to the conscience of a conservative, Barry Goldwater, and so on and so forth. And you know, people often say to me, well, you believe in America, what else do you believe in? Well, I believe in God, personal responsibility, the sanctity of human life, the right to bear arms, a strong national defence, limited government, free markets. These are all things that are very close to my heart, the state of Israel, that are very close to my heart, and that I think is really, really important to the success of a free and confident people. And that's why my organisation, which is non-partisan, is standing up for those virtues and values that catapulted America to the pinnacle nation on this earth. We are going to team up with as many different like-minded organisations as we can, because we want to spread our message as far and wide as possible. We want to reach every single American child. And if there's a school that you want us to come and speak at, if there is somewhere that you want to bring us to, please go onto our website, flagusa.org, flagusa.org.
Bartholomew emails, Nick talked about Donald Trump setting the tone. I was wondering what type of tone Donald Trump was setting at the National Prayer Breakfast when he mocked Arnold Schwarzenegger's Apprentice ratings and then sardonically asked everyone to pray for Arnold.
Well, look, Peter, I think it's fair to say that Donald Trump really is an individual, and he's a character, and he's colourful, and he says and does things that we certainly don't expect from people that have been president of the United States in the past. Now, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I think 95% of the time it's a great thing. It's an interesting thing. It's a fascinating thing, and I welcome it because it's refreshing, quite frankly. Would I have made those comments? No. Would you have made those comments? I don't know, but I'm going to guess not. He's a showman. He's an entertainer. And I don't think that we should be getting all petty and caught up in certain comments that he makes and certain tweets that he makes. I think we need to be big picture here, and we need to look at the stuff that he is actually doing as opposed to just saying. And I think we've seen someone that has entered political office, this is his first political office, but has entered the job as president, and he hasn't stopped. I don't know that the man sleeps. He's just been going one thing after the other, and I welcome that.
Next call for Nick Adams comes from Sandra in Bend, Oregon. Hi, Sandra.
Hi there. It's been great listening to this show. Thank you.
G'day, Sandra.
Hi. I am so fascinated. I personally I'm 74 female, personally have been out of the political foray for many years due to apathy and disillusionment. I think the one good thing that's come out of the left for me is I need to speak up and tell people what I think, and I'm willing to do that. I appreciate you being a standard for the conservative point of view and standing up for your beliefs, especially coming from another country, and telling people how great America is. Thank you.
Well, that's really kind of you. Look, I seek to be your voice where you don't feel to have one. That's why I set up FLAG, because I wanted it to be the voice for millions of Americans that feel that they no longer have a voice in the culture. They no longer have a voice in the mainstream. I want to be that patriotic voice. I want the Foundation for Liberty and American Greatness to be that voice for you in the media, in schools, and everywhere else, because it's really, really important that your view is represented, and that is the greatest honour that we have. The greatest honour that we have is that we can represent people like you and give you your voice back. That's what we're doing, and that's why I'm so excited about our work. And if you want to check out more about our work, then you just go to the website and you can read about all of our programs and all of the success that we've had. We've already trained 4,000 students. We've been into 32 different schools. We are doing really amazing work. flagusa.org.
Abdul is calling in from Morrow, Oregon. Abdul, you're on Book TV.
Good morning.
G'day, Abdul.
Hello.
Abdul, we're listening. Please go ahead and make your comment or question.
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. My name is Abdul. I'm calling from Salem, Oregon. And I'm what do we call it? The citizen of the United States, a very proud citizen of the United States. And I think this is not my first call. I've called you 2 or 3 times ago, and then I expressed my opinion. And I appreciate your program. I appreciate the C-SPAN, and I appreciate Invest. In the meantime, Mr. Adams, really, I appreciate the way you express yourself. In the meantime, your opinion and your points of view. My suggestion or my question might be not just to Mr. Adams, actually to the whole United States maybe political organization. I agree that the United States must have a safe and secure border, by either physically or whatever means that our political agencies they decide that's the right way. I believe at this time building a wall, it is not a bad idea if there's no other way to implement the illegal immigration from south. Coming to Muslims and Arab nationalities who want to come to the United States, I'm a Muslim, and I came to the United States about 30 or 40 years ago. But I have a big problem regarding the Muslims who come to the United States. And not the United States, maybe to Australia and Europe and to other countries where laws and systems are, what they call it, is not based on religion. And religion is somewhat freedom of religion, but religion is not involved in political law and rules and regulations. So, in my opinion, not just my opinion, I'm a Muslim. I was born Muslim. I am a Muslim. But the problem that we have, I'm a Muslim in secular countries like Europe and Australia and Afghanistan, is that they do not, and actually we Americans, of course I'm Afghan American, but Americans, we do not know the concept of Sharia law. The problem with the Sharia law is it is not consistent with the United States or any other secular country's law and constitution.
Right. Hey, Abdul, we're going to get a comment.
Yep.
Thank you for calling in, and thanks for watching. And let's get a comment from Nick Adams.
Abdul, look, you're exactly right. Sharia law and Western civilization are profoundly incompatible. Sharia is about death, slavery, and the pursuit of power. America is about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The two don't mix. And people that are going to come to the United States have got to be American. They've got to believe in American values. They've got to love the United States of America. It shouldn't just be an economic transaction. It shouldn't just be coming here for a job. I think that really there should be more to it than that. You've got to really want to come and be part of the American team. You've got to be on Team America. And those that support Sharia law, those radical elements of your religion, are seeking to destroy America, Israel, the Western world, and they're going to stop at nothing until they achieve the caliphate. And we have got to stand up to them. We've got to recognize and tell the truth about what is going on. And the truth is that Islam, since its inception, has never fought a war of self-defense. From the Battle of Tours to the Battle of Constantinople to the Barbary pirates that Thomas Jefferson was having to deal with, till now, what we're seeing with radical Islamic terrorists right around the world and ISIS, it's very, very clear that we have a substantial problem on our hands, that history is repeating itself, and we need to take action because the stakes are higher now with technology than ever before. And if we don't meet that challenge, if we don't rise to that fight and rise to that war that we are in, and yet so many want to deny and refuse to see and are blind to, then we are going to be the casualties of that war.
Asher Najmuddin emails into you. I'm in the process of watching Mr. Nick Adams spout his nonsense on Book TV. One of the dominant traits of the white race has been discrimination and oppression of every native population. Ask the Aboriginal inhabitants who have lived in Australia for thousands of years.
Well, you know, Peter, look, it's true that both America and Australia have things in their past that are not nice, that weren't wonderful. Should we dwell on them? No. Should we hold a grudge and forever begrudge them for it? Absolutely not. I'm often confronted in the work that I do for FLAG, I'm often confronted with this argument concerning slavery. And slavery is undeniably a black mark on American history, undeniably an evil practice. But the truth is that it wasn't only America that had slavery, and the other truth is that the only country that went to war with itself to end slavery was the United States of America. And that's conveniently left off by people like Asher that have got this ideological straitjacket on, that want to see the world with just a particular type of lens. And if you just see the world through a particular type of lens, effectively you have on this ideological straitjacket and you are really enslaving yourself. And it's time to sever the shackles from past mistakes, to concentrate on all that is great with America. And I can tell you that America's goodness, it's protected more free people, it's protected more people, it's freed more people, it's spread more freedom than anywhere else. The American military is the greatest vehicle against evil ever. And for Asher to talk about the traits of the white race, to use that kind of incendiary language, I think is both unhelpful, it's divisive, and it's just not true. I mean, it was, you know, whether you want to believe it or you don't want to believe it, it was white people that were freeing people all around the world. America is 70 to 80% white today. Now, if you're going to have a problem with white people, then you're a racist. Then clearly you are anti-American, you're un-American. You don't like 80% of the population, and that's a big problem. And that shouldn't be part of the American psyche.
Half hour left with our guest, Nick Adams, who is our guest this month on In Depth. Patrick's in Victorville, California. Patrick, go ahead.
Mr. Adams, I would personally like to thank you for your stance for America. I served in Vietnam for 6 years in the Navy. We were going to go to Australia twice, got turned around, sent back to the Tonkin Gulf. But anyway, that's not my question for calling. When I was a union board maker for 32 years, building oil refineries and power plants and stuff like that. And I went to one of our school districts, the JP Unified School District down in Montclair in Ontario. And I wanted to, because not every child is going to be able to go to college. We understand that. You know, they're just not going to happen. But there are things out there for children The police department gets to go, fire department, they all get to go to the high schools and have a day to talk to students about things other than college. Well, the unions have an apprenticeship program, and you serve 4 years as an apprentice, and your money increases. You start at a certain pay scale, and your money increases as it goes along. And when you become a journeyman, I made a very good living as a union boilermaker. Well, they could be iron workers or pipe fitters or electricians or whatever. There's many crafts there for them to do this. But when I went to school district, and the superintendent of the school district was one of my teachers when I was in high school, he said, absolutely not. You will not talk to those children and tell them anything. Why we have such a narrow-minded thing about unions? Because we wouldn't have the lifestyle we have today if we didn't have a union. Because you'd still be going to work at 12, and that's not 12 at night, be 12 years old.
Oops, I thought you were done there, Patrick. I apologize.
Well, Patrick, thank you for your service. Really appreciate it. You weren't only protecting America, you were indeed protecting the whole world, just like the United States military does. I want to say to you that in terms of school children and in terms of what you were raising there, I think it's important that we expose our students to a variety of different viewpoints, to history. You see, we're not asking for there to be a conservative or a politically incorrect version of a curriculum or events taught. We're just asking for education to be presented objectively. We're just asking for history to be taught objectively. We're not asking to kind of wash away all of the errors and put up a pretend view of America or anything else. We are just seeking to have objectivity and professionalism restored to education here in America. And Peter, can you recall the other things that Patrick was mentioning?
I apologize. I was checking emails and tweets and doing some of my busy work.
Well, but look, Patrick, thank you for your hard work as a union member. Thank you for your service in the military. We are going to try and get into as many schools as we possibly can. Thank you for taking an interest in education, because that's really where the damage is being done right now.
Mike Clemens, I'm watching from Alaska, but can't find a way to call in, so please ask Mr. Adams this question. Aside from the threat that you believe same-sex couples pose, what other factors negatively impact the traditional family?
Well, I think feminism is a very substantial part of that, Peter. I think that all that feminism has delivered is angry women and feminine men. I think it's kind of created a bit of a gender crisis, this whole idea that you can choose your gender now, and that we've got a gender-neutral bathroom, and that men can become women and women can become men, and all of that is pretty anathema to me, and I would think pretty anathema to the millions of Americans right around the country. I think that all of those things pose a very substantial threat to the traditional family, which again I think is the cornerstone of our society, the foundation, the building blocks of our civilization. But I think that this whole demonization of men that we see happening in the world today is very dangerous. It is divisive, it's unhelpful, it's un-American, and long term I think that it's going to lead to the suicide of the West if we are not prepared to act as men, being men, if we're not going to have that kind of confidence, if that testicular fortitude is removed from us, then really we may as well just go and lay down for the enemy and wait for him to come and take us. But that's never been the American way. That's never been the way of free people. And I would just recall the words of the on United flight, the United flight that went down in Shanksville, where when it was realized what was happening Todd Beamer said, let's roll. And that's what we need to do. So I think the return of the alpha male is going to be a boon to traditional families. And I think that a dissipation of feminist influence in our society and culture would be a very welcome thing.
From Retaking America, you write that politicians are the living, breathing proof that America is less free, less feisty, and less fun due to political correctness.
Well, they are. You know, I mean, there was a time, Peter, where if you were a politician, if you were an elected representative, you'd go down to the local restaurant or brewery and have a beer and tell a few jokes, and you could be yourself, and you could say what you really thought, and you could engage with people. I find now that politicians right around the world, and of course President Trump is the glaring exception to this, but politicians right around the world are scared of their own shadow. They speak in platitudes. They don't really say what they mean. They certainly don't mean what they say, and they're pussycats. And I don't think that that's, if you're going to represent people, if you're going to be a voice for people, you know, I want to know that you have some personality. I want to know that there are some meat and potatoes to you. But unfortunately, political correctness and, again, the social media landscape that we live in has made every slip-up, every off-colour joke, every little bit of dangerous humour, if you like, has amplified that and vilified that. And now we have politicians that say to themselves, well, why should I even take a chance? I'm just going to be as vanilla and boring and straight-laced as possible. And as a result, I think that our politics have suffered, that the polity has suffered, and that culture has suffered.
Carol in Tyler, Texas, thanks for holding. You're on with author Nick Adams.
Yes, good afternoon. I've got two quick questions, two areas. One is thanks to C-SPAN for this free press opportunity. What I want to know is why can't Donald Trump, or doesn't Donald Trump and his staff, why won't they acknowledge the important part of a free press in American liberty? Like Thomas Jefferson said, he'd rather have a free press than a government. And secondly, why shouldn't Americans fear any one person who says they alone are the answer to all problems? And thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Carol from Tyler, Texas. I love the Texan drawl. That's great. It's always good to be reminded of home. Carol, look, I don't think that President Trump or his staff have a problem with the free press. I think their problem is with biased press. I think their problem is with press or media outlets that don't give them a fair go, that don't report things fairly, that amplify rumours, that circulate bad news deliberately, that really are not on the team of America. I think that's where the president has an issue. I think that's where his staff have an issue. And I don't think that it can be disputed that very, very substantial parts of the mainstream media have failed America, have failed Americans. And it's something that's got to be changed. It's something that's got to be rectified. Because if it isn't, and if it doesn't get rectified, then what has been happening is going to continue to happen, but only get worse. And I think, Carol, that it's important to recognise the failings of the media, and I think it's important to call for an objective press, much like we call for an objective education system and objective teachers. We want all of those. We want those organisations that have got such a pivotal role in American life to be fair and to be reasonable and to be truthful. And sadly, we're just not getting that right now from our media. So I stand 100% behind President Trump and the White House. with their stand on the media. I think it's about time that we have someone calling the media out and exposing them for what they are. And as someone that has been in the public spotlight since the age of 19, I can tell you that media bias is rampant, that media bias is awful, particularly against conservatives. And again, returning to the earlier discussion that I was having with Peter about Milo Yiannopoulos and other conservative speakers, the media particularly vilifies those that are bold enough to come out and say what they are thinking if they are conservative. There's an idea in the media that it's okay to be conservative, but just don't come out and say it. Don't come out and rub it in our faces.
I'm sure you've seen this article from July of 2015, Jason Wilson, writing in The Guardian, how a would-be pigeon killer became a Fox News pundit. At the end of last month, he writes, "For my sins, I attended the Western Conservative Summit in Denver. The last thing I expected was to find there a third division Australian political hack. Completing the international contingent was Australia's own Nick Adams, billed as a best-selling author and Fox News commentator. Adams started out in Sydney as a young liberal activist. He was elected to Ashfield Council while still a student, and in 2005 became the country's youngest deputy mayor. In office, his big idea was to kill the municipality's pigeons in order to reduce the spread of avian flu."
Well,
give you a chance to respond to that.
Look, Jason Wilson is an awful human being, Peter. I think that you can read from his words that they are tinged with envy, with jealousy, that I've been able to go on and achieve the great things that I've been able to achieve. He's a fifth-rate journalist who's a nobody in Australia. I didn't know that he was at this conference. Evidently he was. Evidently it upset him that I had the platform that I had. It obviously upsets him that I'm a best-selling author and a Fox News commentator. It obviously irks him that I've been able to do more with my life than him. He is right that I was elected to council at the age of 19, one of the youngest ever elected councilmen in Australian history. I was elected the country's youngest deputy mayor in September of 2005, just 8 days after my 21st birthday. I want to clarify for your listeners who probably don't know this, but being a young liberal activist is not liberal in the American sense. The Liberal Party is the mainstream conservative party of Australia, and it's the equivalent of the Republican Party. So when he says young liberal activist, he means young Republican activist. I was never a liberal and have never been. I just want to put that on the record. And I've been a conservative my entire life. So, look, he's free to write whatever he wants to write. Again, I don't really waste my time dealing with lightweights like him, and I'm being kind. If I asked Donald Trump to comment on Jason Wilson, I think we'd probably get more of the truth.
Is the bird thing right about the pigeons?
Sure, that was a motion that was moved in November of 2005. I came up with the idea that because of the avian influenza that was kind of threatening the entire world, one of the big problems and issues that residents had been complaining about constantly was that in the municipality where I lived and where I was representing, most of the homes were heritage homes, and heritage homes have eaves, and eaves are the perfect place for pigeons to come and nest. And so there were lots of problems with pigeon droppings. There were signs all around the municipality that said, "Don't feed the pigeons." And because, again, I'm a little bit colourful and I was really seeking to kind of look after the community on a health point of view, and also because I was seeking to make a name for myself, I did move a motion that was a little bit colourful, saying that, you know, we need to look at ways of eliminating pigeons because pigeons could carry the bird flu, and that's the last thing that we want. But to kind of go back and dwell on that again in some way to diminish my accomplishments in life, to diminish who I am, to diminish my education, to diminish my intellect, I mean, I'm not even going to respond to that.
Ron, Welch's, Oregon. Good afternoon, Ron.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to congratulate Nick on his becoming an American.
Thank you, sir.
And his bureaucracy, which is the INS. Second, I have read many of Nick's books. I've watched him many interviews, as well as actually heard him speak in person. All I really want to say is continue to fight the good fight and continue to write the good book. And that's all I really have to say.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. That's very kind of you, and I will continue to be a voice. I will continue to be out there, and I won't take a backward step.
John, Elkins, West Virginia. Hi, John.
Hi, Nick. Good on you, mate. Glad to have you with us.
G'day, sir. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
You don't hear that much from a Southern boy in the United States, but I've got friends over the pond your direction, and I've been listening to you on the interview, and you hit so many topics. I'm sure I'd love to have more time. First of all, you waste too much time on your critic. I wonder what he's done in his illustrious past to influence public policy to protect the rights and also public health of the constituents from whom he was elected, which is what our job is in government. But we'll leave him alone there. That's all he deserves of my breath. I would like to just give you a little bit of information, just to put at ease some of the folks that are listening to you. Some states in the United States have enacted foreign law statutes to prevent the parallel Sharia Law track coming on track in this country. The infiltration of our country when it comes to the federal government with people from CARE, et cetera. But my biggest thing is you're the kind of person like I am. When I see a problem, I like to grab it and I like to fix it. You're also a classic liberal, which I'm glad you corrected to make sure everybody knows that classic liberalism is the current good conservatism. Of course, unfortunately, a lot of our folks in the United States don't know Edmund Burke and John Locke, and the list goes on, which we should, and that is by design. We have a problem where the American public doesn't know the history of the Fabian socialism and the creeping 100-year march of socialism through our system. And we have good groups that are starting to push back now, victims of communism here in the United States, to enlighten people as to the 100 million people killed in the last century. So what I see is we've gone through Wilson, FDR, Johnson, Clinton, also Obama, but our educational system is so corrupted where they haven't been given the other side of the coin, and now you have our situation on campuses where, you don't have free speech unless you're preaching Che Guevara. And thank goodness for Trump wanting to take away the federal funds if they're not going to give them free speech. But I'm just curious what your strategy would be to correct this, because whenever I start to talk to people about the communism, Marxism, which they think is the greatest thing in the world that we should change our model to, they're ignorant that 100 million people were killed in the last century under that type of authoritarian ideology. And the other thing that they always give me this look on when I talk to them, and I tell them, I say, what is the other common element in all of the authoritarian regimes other than lack of free speech, lack of political participation, et cetera? What's the one common element? And then when I tell them the black market, free market capitalism at its purest, supply, demand, risk, then they all of a sudden look at you like, oh, wow. But our biggest problem here, like I said, in our country is we've been dealing with 100 years of the educational system, Dewey,
John, we're going to get a response. Thanks for calling.
John, from one southerner to another, albeit much more southern, originally anyway, now probably a neighbour. Thank you. Thank you for your call. Thank you for your kind words. Look, my strategy has always been to show up and fight. My strategy has always been to turn up. My strategy has always been to use the tactics of the left back against them. That's the only thing that's going to work. That's the only way we can win this fight. We have got to be prepared to employ the tactics of the left back against them. It may not come naturally to us. It may not be comfortable with us and to us. But we have got to do it, because if we don't do it, if we don't want to win as much as they want to win, then we just won't win. So my strategy is to do what they've been doing, but better and bigger and bolder and stronger. And I'm utterly convinced that we can win this fight. The education system, you're exactly right. And I just want to tie in something you were talking about with the earlier caller from California, who I've now recalled what it was I was going to say. One of the biggest issues I think facing America today is that students are going to college that shouldn't be going to college. And as a result, we have a shortage of plumbers, we have a shortage of electricians, and it's part of this politically correct approach to education where everybody gets a trophy, where we have, for the last 30 years, demonized trades in this country, and we have elevated and praised college education. College education is fantastic, but it is not for everyone. And there are far too many students in the college system that, quite frankly, should not be there and would make great tradespeople. Not to mention that tradespeople make more money than almost everybody else. So it is something that needs to be rectified, and we should make sure that there are good young people going in to trades as opposed to colleges when their academic ability and the intellect that is requisite for those courses is just not there.
Tweet from R.S. Field. Mr. Adams, when did Aussies turn into Scandinavians? I think Yanks and Southerners think of Aussies as wild like us. I love Oz.
Yeah, look, it's a great point, Peter, and it's something that I confront everywhere I go, whenever I speak anywhere. The international perception of Australia is vastly different to the domestic reality. The international perception, obviously, kind of perpetuated by Crocodile Dundee. This is not a knife, this is a knife. And the crocodile hunter who tragically died back in 2006, Steve Irwin, another great friend of America, great lover of the United States. Those guys really helped push this idea that Australia is something that it really isn't. And that is that Australia is this place of rugged individualists that don't take any nonsense, that wrestle crocodiles by day and box kangaroos by night. I know, can't believe that it's not true. And the reality is that we're the second most urbanised country in the world. The second most urbanised country in the world. 89% of Australians live in one of the 6 major cities: Sydney, Hobart, Adelaide, Brisbane, Melbourne or Perth. Now, that's significant because you have to think about where culture is created. Culture is created where the population density is. And it shouldn't surprise anyone that Australia has Scandinavian values, to use the language of the tweeter, when you have that Australia has big city values on a national stage, when the overwhelming majority of people live in and come from and hail from big cities. The really interesting point that all of your viewers should think about, and this is just a Nick Adams hypothesis. I haven't really, I'd like to get some flag, I'd like to get some more money to really study this. But when I look at and I count up all of the population centres of Los Angeles, New York and Chicago and Dallas-Fort Worth and Atlanta, Georgia and everywhere else, you don't get past 80 million. You don't get past 80 million. Now, America's got 300 million people. Goodness knows how many illegals, but let's just say 300 million. That means that less than 1/3 of America's population lives in a big city. That means that 2/3 live in a rural area, a regional area, a country town, And that's why Sarah Palin said something in 2008 that I never forgot. In a rare moment of lucidity, she said that America is a country of small towns as opposed to big cities. And she was 100% exactly correct. It is. It is very much that way. And that's why, at least up until recently, and now probably again with President Trump, see, I've always believed, Peter, that America is the one country in the world whose political gravity is right of centre. I do believe that the natural heart and soul of America is conservative. I think it's the only country in the world that is inherently ideologically conservative. And it's because I think very much a big role of that is the demography that I've just outlined. And it's why America has, on a national level, always represented small town values, values of family, values of patriotism, values of military, unlike anywhere else in the world. And I don't know if there's an equivalent, if there are other countries that we can really assess that against, apart from Australia, which I've already referenced. But I do think it's a very interesting thing to consider about America, that the overwhelming majority of people do not live in a big city. And big cities are synonymous with big government, and big government is synonymous with Democrat support.
Let's hear from Frank in Indianapolis. Frank, I think you're going to be the last call.
Hello, C-SPAN, and hello, Mr. Adams. Well, I've been listening to you talk for a while, and speaking as a disgusting communist progressive like myself. Well, I guess there is I guess I do have a few bones to pick. You've talked about how feminism has destroyed American culture to an extent. Men have been demonized. You've spoken out against homosexuals and transgenders. And you've done all this from the from the standpoint that our education system needs to be reorganized in some sense. And you've also talked about how Donald Trump is in no way a despot. I would like you to comment perhaps on the activities of his campaigners and of his supporters on the internet, like the so-called alt-right, who have made it a culture of harassment against females and minorities of all stripes online. Trump supporters shouting out Lucan press during rallies. Also, you say that the press is biased, but, well, the fact is they've caught Trump saying outright mistruths and total lies, misinformation, and then they simply call him on it, and then they say, well, they call him on it, and somehow they're biased. What is your take on the notion of education versus indoctrination? Because it seems to me that you are...
Hey, Frank, just because we're running short on time, you put a lot on the table. Nick Adams, what do you want to respond to?
Well, indoctrination is what the left does. Indoctrination is what the left have been doing for a long time. I'm not about indoctrination. I'm about education. That's what my organisation, the Foundation for Liberty and American Greatness, is about. We're about educating the next generation of American leaders, what it means to be an American, what Americanism is, what comprises and constitutes the American value system. We want to give those children the confidence to be able to not only to continue to manufacture that value system, but give them the confidence to be able to export it for the benefit of the entire world. I understand that you have a very different worldview to mine, and I respect that. That's fine. But I happen to think that you are very wrong on a number of instances that you have outlined. I don't want to credit any of the things that you've said with respect to Donald Trump and his supporters. I don't know any of that to be true. You talk about harassment online. If you go onto my Twitter feed right about now, I'm sure that you'll see a plethora of harassment. So, I mean, the same goes for both sides. I don't like any of that stuff. I think I've made that clear here this afternoon. I believe in America. I love the United States of America. This is the greatest country in the history of the world. The United States military is the finest vehicle against fighting evil ever. I've come here to make, not take, to give, not receive. I've come to join the place, not change it. I've come because I believe I have a debt to repay the American people and the American nation. I've come because I don't want America to become like everywhere else. I want it to be America. I want it to be the refuge for talented people everywhere. And I'd hope that Americans of all stripes, of all colours, of all creeds, everywhere, all around, will support the Foundation for Liberty and American Greatness and the work that we do, flagusa.org.
Nick Adams is the author of 5 books. America, the Greatest Good came out in 2010. Exceptional America, A Message of Hope from a Modern-Day De Tocquevill came out in 2012. The American Boomerang, How the World's Greatest Turnaround Nation Will Do It Again, 2013. Retaking America, Crushing Political Correctness came out last year, as did Green Card Warrior, My Quest for Legal Immigration in an Illegal System. You've been watching In Depth on Book TV on C-SPAN 2.